Mrs. Sheila Na Buama, who is a former executive secretary of NAPTEX. Looking very well as well. Thank you very much. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And then we'll have on Zoom the Chief Executive Officer of Deloitte East Africa, Mr. Joe Ishen, will be joining us on Zoom. If he is live, we can have him, but if we don't, in the course of the discussion, we would have him join us and he will do his presentation as well. We'll as well put up questions to him. We'll also have in the studio here in the course of time, Mrs. Abena Osaipuku, who is the Managing Director of Absa Bank, Ghana. So this is how the program is going to go this morning. We'll have the first round of presentations for the first three presenters. We'll have a round of questions and answers. If you are in your house, you can put up your questions to us. Those of us in the studios here as well, you may want to put up your questions to us. And those online, we will welcome your questions. We'll hand over to the organizers of the event, but we'll ask him just about one question, and then he can go ahead and do his presentation. Mr. Michael Harry Yamson is the managing partner of Ishmael Yamson and Associates. We were talking just 2 days ago and asking you how the show is going to go and the presenters that you are going to have here. It looks very powerful this morning.
Well, you see the caliber present here, and I'm very sure that we will throw some great light on this subject and build out the canvas that young people can now paint their futures upon.
Right. So Michael Harry Yamson is the managing partner of Ishmael Yamson and Associates. We'll have him for the welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Michael Harry Yamson.
Well, thank you once again. Before I start, I'd like to pay a quick tribute to my friend and partner, Mr. Raymond Daka, with whom I have spent some 8 years building out this business roundtable and establishing the brand that it has become. Unfortunately, he passed away in January this year, and I'd like to honor his memory. But to our purpose today, I would say these few words. Ishmael Yamson and Associates Business Roundtable is a forum that presents to corporate Ghana, the public sector, development partners, civil society, and all other stakeholders in our socioeconomic endeavors, an untouched canvas on which to paint a picture of the future and economy we seek to develop. This is neither a talk shop nor a parliament. It is a public square and a lighthouse for sharing experience, opportunity, best practice, and inspiration. Our goal is to stimulate thought and action from these expositions. As the Ishmael Yamson Associates Business Roundtable has grown from 22 guests invited to our maiden edition in 2014 to discuss hope in the midst of crisis, as our economy lurched in response to disastrous monetary policy decisions, to over 700 participants from 20 countries across all 5 continents last year. We have stayed true to our principle not to be directive, but to be a catalyst for change and a resource for rethinking the validity of our assumptions about progress, innovation, stakeholders, and the potential of our country. In developing this program, we at Ishmael Yamson Associates have explored in 3 papers prior to this event the import of the theme for 2021, Youth-Driven and Youth-Centered Development, Africa's Future. The new leadership role of the private sector in training Africa's youth to drive growth, and the critical collaboration that government must orchestrate between itself, the private sector, and educational institutions to ensure that the first 2 topics are successfully executed. Our speaker's role today and always is to share ideas that participants and later viewers of the roundtable can use as a template or framework to develop unique solutions and approaches to address the development and growth opportunities that lie before us. Kindly share your questions using the Q&A and chat functions. We'll try to get as many as possible answered during the Q&A sessions. But before I take leave of you, let me also thank those who have made today's event possible, our sponsors. Metro TV, our proud media sponsor. Stanbic Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, Gasem, Ghana Limited, Benso Oil Palm Plantation, Enterprise Insurance, Lucozade Ghana, Absa Bank Ghana, Cal Bank, and Business 24 for their support. We look forward to welcoming all of you to BRT 2022 next year. Now it is my honor to let the oracles speak. Thank you very much.
Right. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I thought we were going to at least acknowledge the welcome address. Can you help me? Kindly. So that's the managing partner of Ishmael Yamson and Associates, of course, opening the floor for all the presentations now to begin. It's now time for us to begin the thinking. Listen, first of all, begin the thinking, provocative ideas, provocative thoughts, and to put all of our ideas together this morning. We'll begin with a lady by name, Dr. Abna Asumenin Entry, and I want to introduce her properly. She is currently the Managing Director of the Africa Environmental Sanitation Consult, AFSEC, a leadership lecturer at one of Ghana's public universities, and has previously worked with a number of government ministries. For over a decade, she operated an NGO which supports the rehabilitation and reintegration of women and juvenile prison inmates and abused children in Ghana, and won an award in 2018 from the Queen of England under the Points of Light Award to be the 62nd young individual in the world for her humanitarian work with women and contribution towards development in Ghana. She has been recognized by the President of France under the Female de Jour recognition for women achievers in Africa, and also won the MTN Heroes of Change Award for social protection in 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, Abna Asumenin Entry, kindly help me welcome her. So she would have a presentation, and we'll put the presentation, of course, on the screen. It is ready now, and we can have Dr. Mrs. Abna now.
Thank you. My presentation today, I've themed the Africa we want. Yes. And what I want to talk about generally is my focus is on the policy framework that Africa has to its advantage, that the youth can take advantage of. Also, and these we can take from the African Union, the Continental Free Trade Area, and then the Sustainable Development Goals. What this means to us is that within these spaces, there are different aspects that can help us with a discussion of youth-related issues. And with the three that I mentioned, of these are converging areas, policy areas. And we talk about jobs and decent work, which seems to be priority to all the policies that I've mentioned. I also talk about women, girls, and youth empowerment. There's also the issue of health and nutrition. Poverty reduction is key. Then there's education, science, technology, and innovation. There are different aspects to this, and I'm sure in our discussions, they would come up. We also talk about economic diversification, which I think our various governments are attempting to put in place to cover the unemployment situation that has hit the continent. Also, the issue of climate change is also covered in there. The unemployment situation presents us with a ticking bomb. And there is a category of young people who are not in education, employment, and training on the continent, and we have 54.5 million of such. And for me, I consider this critical and calls for attention because with these, we are not safe as a continent. These are idle hands just waiting to jump on the next opportunity, whether good or bad, to do whatever they can. And this category of young people must be engaged. There's also the issue of the children who work. And globally, Africa is sort of known for the number of children who work in our various industries. There's 72 million of them. And this is also very worrisome. On the continent, we have some emerging economies that we can be proud of. And the OECD mentions Ghana, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Tanzania. And these are to give us a certain kind of hope as to what we are all learning to do with and for each other. And this presents a lot of hope for us. And I believe that we can learn from the economies that are doing well. And so if we get into particularly the AFTA, which is focused on trade integration, some of these, the goodwill of some of these countries can rub off the other ones. I want to also talk about the attitude of our young people. And I think that all the policies that have been framed for us it cannot be implemented if we don't have the youth that are going to avail themselves for implementation. And so we talk about the youth and the attitude. In my presentation, I want to highlight the fact that we have, unfortunately, on the continent now, a get-rich attitude by young people. And this is worrisome. And so we want to talk about how young people have to lend themselves to the process, because success is not, it's a whole journey. It's not a one-time event. And so I mentioned the fact that agriculture, which is key to economic development and which can absorb a big chunk of the labor force, seems to have been neglected by many. And this is not something that we can continue to observe without mention. Also, the issue of the type of agriculture that we want to go into should also be talked about. We cannot continue with small scale farming. We have to go mechanized. And this means big plantations where big numbers of labor can be employed. But critically, our governments have to pay attention to this. And this is one of the areas I hope that after the SDGs and the others can also bring us together in pursuing. The other area that I think calls for, and I talked about attitudes, also is that often young people, particularly after school, are put under pressure to attain a certain status, which often, if you are observing from other people, they may have gone through a long time to get to that kind of status. It makes it difficult for young people to start thinking that they have to go through internships. Some internships are not even appreciated. Some internships are paying very low rates. You know, in some countries, they are known to be paying below the wage limit. And so that is worrisome. Doesn't make these kinds of spaces attractive for young people to want to go into. The other challenge is also that we have technology at our disposal. Quite a lot is happening. A lot of things are happening on the continent. We can cite Twitter's entry into Ghana. We can also talk about a program that is going on in Tanzania. I think the ATIP, which is 32 million pounds or so. We have a few other things. Rwanda is doing amazing things in the e-mobility space. They are running a cashless system. And so it allows for a lot of room for innovation and great thoughts. Unfortunately, we find some youth using the same technology that's supposed to enhance development for negative things. And so that must be checked. I have worked over 14 years with young people who have been involved in crime. And cyber crime is one of the things that is very attractive. I think it does pay well in one breath. But then when you are also caught, you have to pay the price, unfortunately. I'll talk about leadership. We cannot complete this discussion without the mention of leadership. And I'm critical about leadership in Africa because when the leaders make difficult or make unfortunate decisions is the young people who suffer for it. And what I want to mention here is the fact that we are not paying attention. If we want a youth-driven development agenda for the continent, we are not paying attention to climate change issues, and it will come back to haunt us very badly. And with that, I will talk about Galamsey in Ghana. I want to talk about the Zamazamas in South Africa. I want to talk about DRC and how they use young people to mine illegally coltan. And we must, as a continent, speak about these issues, and leadership must be seen. The young people are observing. It's what in common parlance or ordinary language, you say monkey see, monkey do. And we must get into that space where leadership is taking a bold step to step on these, to get out of these things. The last I will mention is on partnerships. In the past, various people have complained, and I've experienced this, various people have complained about how when you go outside to the West and you mention that you are from Africa, they assume Africa is one country. And everybody's assuming, oh, do you know Nyerere? Do you know Abiola? And you are saying you are from Ghana. And it's unfortunate that contextualizing Africa has been lost on many, because the assumption is that if you are from Africa, you must be from a war-torn area, or you must be from a poverty-ridden country. And it's almost always very difficult explaining that we have very well-educated people, industrious people doing amazing things on the continent. And so that's one area. And so in terms of partnerships, which I talk about, in terms of partnerships, we need development partners to put different countries in context, in partnering with us before looking at us as a continent. Because without that, we may be prescribing solutions that may be useful for Mali, where they have civil wars, to Ghana, where we have a stable democracy, and this won't work. So this is what I have for this morning. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Mrs. Abena Asumenin Entry. She is the Managing Director, Africa Environmental Sanitation Consult. And she's hit on a number of points. And I told you early on that we are going to have thought-provoking presentations this morning, after which we'll have our questions. I'll reserve my comments for now, and we'll go on to have the two other presenters in the first round before we come up with our questions. So when we get to the questions and answers point, I'll bring up all the points and the questions that I've put down, and I'll be asking her. We'll take a quick breaker. When we are back, we'll have the next presentation from Joe Ishen, who is the Chief Executive of Deloitte and Touche.
Our todays and yesterday are the blocks with which we build. With sand, water, and the all-important material cement, we build cities, houses, factories, roads, bridges. Breaking their backs, the builders build. GASEM, with 50 years of experience, has various grades for various jobs. The GASEM Super Rapid 32.5R is suitable for plastering for the perfect finish and all other jobs. The GASEM Super Strong 42.5R is best suited for block manufacturing. And GASEM Extra 42.5M is the best choice for the biggest construction work. Never believe that one grade of cement can be used for all jobs. Choose GASEM Cement always.
3 cement grades, unique quality. GASEM, the nation builder.
Right, so you're welcome back to the Business Roundtable brought to us by Ishmael Yamson and Associates. We've just listened to Dr. Mrs. Abena Asumenin Entry. She was talking to us about quite a number of things. The fact that the youth of Africa today want to get rich immediately they complete school. And we need to have a critical look at that, areas of agriculture, climate change, and so on and so forth. We'll have the second presentation, and I would introduce this guest. I would go a bit of a detail. And it says, this man that we are about to listen to, his name is Joe Ishen, and he's currently the Chief Executive Officer for Deloitte in East Africa, covering Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. Throughout his over 27 years of experience, he has worked with both public and private sector clients across Africa. Within the public sector, he led the development of innovative products designed to respond to the international lending and donor agencies and government's need for efficiency, accountability, and transparency. These products have led to Deloitte's management of over $900 million for over 15 donors, and on behalf of the governments of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda in several sectors, including health and education. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Ishen is currently the Chief Executive Officer of Deloitte East Africa, and it covers, as we have stated early on, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. He is joining us via Zoom, and so we'll listen to his presentation via Zoom. Joe, if you can hear me, good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us. I can see you live and colored here. I hope you can see us from our location here in Ghana as well.
Yes, I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So if you can hear us, we'll welcome you with a round of applause, then you can take over. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Joe Ishen.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from Nairobi. And it's 12:38, and it's actually 21 degrees in Nairobi. And Michael, thank you very much for inviting me to this very important roundtable. And I will, because I'm presenting from a distance, I will let the organizers know when to move my slide deck. So to start, what is interesting is I'm a 52-year-old man, and I believe I still have lots of energy and passion for the work I do. But when I look back to the ages of 16 to 30, I realized that I had more energy than I do now. And on reflection, I actually do think that the three organizations that I've worked for could have taken much more from me. My paper today will focus on moving from learning to earning in Africa, because I am worried with the inability of our young people to be able to earn a decent salary, or even in most cases, no salary at all. So what I want you to do is, if you can move to the first slide, the context slide. So by 2035, there will be more Africans entering the workforce each year than in the rest of the world combined. Now, do you know what that means? We are going to be a powerhouse. And we all know, and we say that development will and it should be youth-driven, because this will be the majority of our population and a significant portion of our economic life force. But the issue is young people between the ages of 15 and 35 already comprise approximately 75% of our population. But if you look at the demographic breakdown within their categories, 60% of the unemployed are within the youth category. Out of this, 31% are unemployed and highly discouraged. I would say that only around 15% are wage employed, with 35% facing underemployment, and I will call it vulnerable employment that cannot be relied upon consistently for survival. So you can all see that as we have strengthened our prioritization for education across Africa, we are still facing, to some extent, a slightly over-educated but underutilized market, where more of our young people are gaining access to skills, but not finding the opportunities to put the skills to use. So we must ask ourselves, at what point would the learning of our young people actually translate to earning? And I can see a mismatch at the moment. So what I want to do today, if you can move to the next slide, is to share with you the objective of my presentation. What I want to do is to look at how private sector can be at the forefront of youth development in Africa to help address the gap between learning and earning. And at the end of the presentation, I hope that my colleagues on the panel and us will have practical ideas that we can all rally around across Africa. So I'm going to cover 4 things. And if you can move to the next slide, which is the content slide. The first thing I'm going to look at is, why is there a gap between learning and earning, and why is it widening? The second is, at a high level, what can private sector do to contribute to youth development in Africa? The third, and will be very brief, I still believe that governments have some role to play. So what can governments do to contribute to youth development? And then I will conclude. So if you can move to the next slide. And this slide, what it shows is an interesting point for me. So if you look at the transition between our education system and the way we participate in the economy, it is marred with really structural challenges. I believe that the gaps we see today with regards to young people's participation in the economy is actually by design, and it's not necessarily tied to whether young people are doing enough in their own individual right. Our challenges actually begin from how we embed and encourage the right mindset into young people, to whether we are investing sufficiently in their success. It is also actually driven by the challenge of government and the private sector understanding what young people need for them to be very successful. So firstly, our education syllabi are not enriching our young people with the right technical and transferable skills, which is required to help them thrive, whether to be employed or self-employed. Look, we have not scrutinized our education system in the way that can help us. Many of our current systems are feeding information to our young people without teaching them how to actually create value. And we have socially viewed vocational training with disdain. And while these skills are actually necessary for our people to build and work in the manufacturing economies. So we have really also siloed the workforce and professional training from being embedded in our education system. And this, for me, is a real challenge for us. We must remember, however, that training young people to participate in development starts with building character and values that are really shaped in childhood and young adulthood. So we really tend to expect that all our children will focus on really standard subjects, which we've assumed will shape them. But the right combination is required. For example, sports will breed discipline and resilience. The humanities will help explore our personal values and exercise our creative minds. Maths and science will teach us the logical structuring and hypothesis testing that we need to be able to solve problems. So if you look deep, there's really a growing gap between our shared values, where many of us view ways of working and opportunities for growth in a different way from our millennials. So many of our younger people prefer less hierarchical and more transparent environments that will allow flexibility for them to thrive. So at Deloitte, we did an interesting survey. We call it the Deloitte Millennial Survey. And the insight here for me is that 70% of millennials expect that their employers will focus on societal or mission-driven issues. So you can all agree that no other generation has exerted such an impact on the way we do business, on employee experience, or on customer expectations than this generation. The choices that young people take, where they work, where they buy, who they buy from, are more aligned with their values than any other generation. So we might want to start bringing young people to the table in more tangible ways. So what I want to do is I want to focus on the role that the private sector can play. So if you can move to the next slide to look at what the private sector can do to contribute to youth development. So on the topic of resourcing, I want to emphasize that there is a gap that we often do not discuss enough. And I think Dr. Bernard did mention this. Africa's biggest employer is still agriculture, but we have not aligned the success factor in this industry to drive youth engagement in it. And according to the World Bank, non-farming sectors, the non-farming sectors, including banking, insurance, will not be able to produce enough jobs and economic opportunities to absorb all the graduates in Africa. So agriculture is a route that we have to really consider. And we must consider addressing access to land, financing, and large-scale agriculture options for young people to drive this sector as well. So what I'll do now is to go to the next slide to look at the 4 key things that a private sector can contribute to address equity and support young people to participate in development. So if you go to that slide, the first point is scaling finance for startups. And on this panel, there's a lot of bankers on the panel, and they probably will be able to relate to what I'm going to talk about. African businesses are generally undercapitalized, impacting their ability to grow. That's a known fact. You know, I've been in East Africa since 1995. And I look at the Nairobi startup scene, it has faced a lot of issues where they are now having to have Silicon Valley-based faces at the forefront of their companies as a strategy to raise capital from the West. So consequentially, this has often led to a stream of shareholder value exiting the continent as startups grow and start breaking even. So Flutterwave, some of you may know Flutterwave from Nigeria. This Nigeria-based payment company has just been valued at over $1 billion, and they have raised 170 million in March. This was solely funded by American firms. So the challenge is that local financiers are risk averse around young businesses and at our own expense, because we are leaving our disruptive startups to be funded by the West or not funded at all enough to properly take off. So to mitigate our risk or potentially better protect these investments brings up my second point, which is investing in long-term, large-scale skill building for Africa. Because many of our private sector youth training interventions are narrowly targeted and are often internal initiatives. So we got to move away from there. You know, when Deloitte took on supporting the Young African Leaders Initiative Regional Center in Nairobi, I wanted us to participate in a large-scale initiative where we can build a large region-wide alumni network and partnership where other private sector players can play. And I think this is very important to encourage young people in the region. So our experience with YALI brings me to my third point, which is significant participation in the intervention designed for young people is required. And the question is, are we, the private sector, willing to invest our time and resources to develop demand-driven programs for young people? Are we engaging government and the international donor players around policy on the kind of skills that we need to see from young people to build a better talent pipeline and develop incentives that will also influence participation of the private sector? And that is the third challenge that we have. And the last one that I want to talk about is committing to make a shift in our workplace cultures as private sector. I believe this will allow us to pay better attention to young people's inputs and contributions to how we do business, and in the long run, how we grow our economies. Because look, the viewpoint of younger generations will be critical to creating a new normal in the post-COVID world. And all corporates, all organizations need to reset and listen to their younger employees to create a better normal for our countries and to set an example to our society that can ensure that young people will take the steering wheel and drive change. And I believe this will be profitable if we do that. So culture, to me, is significant because all of us know culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you want fresh ideas, we cannot bring them into an archaic environment and be unwilling to change the way of doing things to implement the commitments we take to the young people. So that covers my second point. I want to move quickly to my third point, my third area, which is how government can contribute to youth development. So if you can move to that slide, slide 8. So I've spoken about private sector's engagement, but I do want to wrap up by emphasizing that the private sector cannot do it all. We still cannot leapfrog the public sector's significant role in youth-driven development. Youth participation in economic activity is a structural issue. It's rooted in economic growth and policy more than anything else. So I'll wrap up by reiterating that youth-driven development will begin by 1, a radical shift in our education system and ways of learning to incorporate more transferable skills with better investment into vocational and agricultural training instead of it being viewed as an alternative education route. Secondly, we need to lower the barriers young people face to actively engage in policy and politics. The third is we have to make sure that the industries we want to engage young people in are tangibly attractive for them through some benefits and government investment support. Look, if you look at America and Asia, they did the same. Singapore and Taiwan actually supported the industry that generate the highest level of jobs for its people. So if you go to my final slide, I would like to conclude here that, we are in uncertain times. We're all very tired with COVID, but despite this uncertain and discouraging conditions, I am convinced that millennials, Generation Zs, they express impressive resiliency and resolve to improve the world, even during this time of COVID. So as we rebuild our economies and society, youth interventions should not be isolated from the wider conversation around economic development that requires massive overhauls, significant investing to address broader issues. There is an African proverb that states that what a child learns in youth will continue in old age. Look around us and see what these millions of young people are learning now, and be fearful of what the future holds for us if we do not intervene. The youth can walk faster, but the elders know the way. And this is where we as a private sector should come in and show the way so that the fast pace of the youth can take us to a better developed state. And to the young people on this session, please take the advice of Steve Jobs and find work in what you love to do. Young people, you are resilient, and they are committed to changing the world. The conversation moving forward of youth development must continue to be intertwined with a wider conversation around economic development. Thank you all for listening.
Right, so ladies and gentlemen, Joe Ishen, he is the Chief Executive Officer of Deloitte. We are happy to have you, and then that was a very powerful presentation. If you are still online, I'm sure you will still stay on for the question and answer session. Quite a number of revelations and quite a number of issues being raised up there that needs attention. We are preparing for our next presenter. We'll have a quick break, and when we come back, this is a person you want to listen to. Stick and stay with us.
Anywhere you dare can be get out.
Akusia, I'm awful. Have to go deposit some money at the bank and buy some things at the mall.
Okay, but deposit money at this time. Which bank is still open?
Oh, Akusia. With a Stanbic ATM, even without your debit card, you can deposit money at the ATM. And you know the ATM doesn't close. It is 24/7.
Oh, wow. That's good. Oh. You know, as for me, when I close late, I have to carry the money on me home with all the rest. And sometimes even when I'm asleep and I hear mosquitoes making noise in my ears, I have to wake up and check if the money is still there.
Oh, Akosia, don't make me laugh.
I'm serious, baby. It's not easy for me at all.
Me cable.
Hey, but Jane, no could be view.
I'm off to the mall now.
Introducing the Enterprise app by the Enterprise Group. Access products and services of all our subsidiaries at your own convenience on your smartphone, tablet, or PC. The app allows you to automatically calculate your premium, view your policy status, renew your policy, submit a service request, register a claim, and check a claim status. Make online payments via mobile money or debit card, and enjoy so many other useful features. Download the app today by tapping the Play Store or the App Store icon on your smartphone and searching for Enterprise Advantage app. Select the app and install on your phone. Also scan this QR code right now to download the app, or visit my.enterprisegroup.net.gh on your PC to use it on the web.
Enterprise, your advantage.
You're welcome back from that break. So we are still in the 2021 edition of Business Roundtable, of course, brought to us by Ishmael Jansen and Associates and powered by Metro TV. We've listened to two distinguished presentations already. We are going to have the third one, and then we'll open up the floor for the questions. We understand that quite a number of questions are coming through on Zoom and on Facebook as well. So kindly continue putting them through. When we are set with the third one, we'll have all of these questions and get answers from the whole of our panel, after which we'll come back for the second round of presentations. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I have the singular honor to present to you the third presenter for the morning, and her name is Charlotte. I'll read a bit of her background, and I'll try as much as possible to do this very quickly. She's a lawyer with 26 years experience in the public and private sectors. She holds a Master of Laws degree, LLM, from Queen's University, Ontario, Canada, and a Master's in Business Leadership, MBL, from the University of South Africa, Pretoria. LLB, Honorable degree from the University of Ghana, Legon, and BL from the Ghana School of Law. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlotte Osei has previously served as first female chairperson of Ghana's Electoral Commission and first female chairperson of Ghana's National Commission for Civic Education. She was also a vice president or chairperson of the executive board of the African Capacity Building Foundation in Zimbabwe and a former president of the African Association of Election Authorities. I'll jump a bit of it and come to, in 2019, Charlotte was appointed by the United Nations and the government of Afghanistan as an international electoral commissioner to the Electoral Complaints Commission of Afghanistan. Prior to this, in 2017, Charlotte led the ECOWAS fact-finding mission to Sierra Leone ahead of that country's 2017 elections and was deputy head of ECOWAS fact-finding mission to Nigeria ahead of the 2019 elections. She also served as the technical expert legal to ECOWAS long-term observer mission to the Nigerian 2019 general elections. In 2020, which is last year, she led another ECOWAS technical mission to Liberia to clean up the country's voter roll ahead of December 2020 senatorial elections. She manages a commercial and corporate law firm, Prime Attorneys, which she founded in 2008. In 2020, she started a TV show for coaching and mentoring young entrepreneurs. And this is very key for us. The Business Compass, which she hosts. She is also the convener of the 30 Women Tribe, which supports, encourages, and mentors women. Charlotte holds many academic awards and distinctions and is a published writer. Charlotte is married and blessed with children. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to help me welcome for the third presentation, Miss or Mrs. Charlotte, or say, oh, please help me welcome her appropriately, and then let's pay rapt attention to her presentation.
Thank you very much, Chrissy, and thank you for having me at the 2021 Business Roundtable. Kudos to Ishmael Yamson and Associates. I particularly think that this year's theme is a brilliant one. Youth-driven and youth-centered development and the role it's going to play in Africa's future. I don't think that Africa is going to have a future without that. And after Chrissy's very long introduction, I'm very happy that we're talking about the youth and development and not about elections today. It's a tiring topic. So the two distinguished speakers who went ahead of me really did paint a picture of where we are in Africa in terms of education, training, and the kind of support, particularly from the policy and the private sector levels that the youth need. But I just wanted to do a quick run through this. So Africa has 19% of the global youth population. That's huge. And these are 2015 stats. 60% of Africa's population is below 25 years. That should give us cause to pause and think. And that makes 226 million people. Every year, 11 million young Africans join the labor market. And every year, Africa produces 3.7 million formal jobs. So that's a gap that we create every year, and it just keeps growing and it keeps accumulating. All these stats are projected to increase by 42% by 2030. So clearly, African governments and the people of Africa have a lot of work to do. Depending on how we look at it, and if we don't manage the youth population properly, we're either looking at a big crisis in a very short term, or we're looking at a huge opportunity. But it all depends on the decisions we take today and what we choose to do concerning the youth of Africa. In talking through this, thinking through this topic, I really thought that the race to development is really, it's a global race. It is a race in many senses. And it's like a relay race. And a lot really depends on what has happened before and what is going to happen after. And if we look at it very well, African youth are right there in the center. How far they are ahead depends on the actions that have happened with the generations before them. And to be very frank, I don't think we've done a brilliant job. I think that my generation and the generation before, we have failed the generation of youth today and the ones that are coming. And I just want to tell African youth that the baton is now in their hands. The power is in their hands. There is power in that baton, and it may be time for them to snatch it from us. If they really want a better future, I can see Michael squirming beside me, but that's unfortunate. Yeah, they may have to snatch it because it's a relay, and we've run a not very good race so far. And the actions that we take today and the actions that they take today can make the continent. And they need to really wake up and start thinking about how to grab that baton. From what I know, old people in Africa don't hand over the baton very easily. So I'm speaking to the youth, and I want to tell them that they are the solutions that we seek. And I truly believe that, yes, government has a role to play, but the power of the future lies in the business sector. It's going to lie with African entrepreneurs. And there's a myriad of challenges which they have, which we need to address. And again, I do not think that the older generation have the capacity the energy or the mindset to effectively address these challenges. Even if they have the capacity, they may not have the energy. And when they have the energy and the power, I don't see that they have the right mindset. So it's going to fall back on the youth. I want to talk about the power of one, and I want to illustrate that with two Ghanaian personalities, especially because I think 71% of our audience is Ghanaian. And I hope the other people watching from around Africa would find inspiration in these two personalities. Very well known in Ghana, Teta Kwashi and Esther Oklu. So Teta Kwashi was born in 1842, and most of us know the story of Teta Kwashi. He was a blacksmith, and he traveled to work in Equatorial Guinea in 1870. In 1876, he returned to Ghana. Just after 6 years, he was 34, and he carried some cocoa seedlings with him. He planted this at Mampong in 1879, and on a side note, his hobby was farming. Now, eventually, the seedlings that he brought, the beans that he brought, were even exported from the Gold Coast to Nigeria and Sierra Leone. So if those countries have cocoa today, it's because of the actions of Teta Kwashi. And in 1891, we started exporting, and officially through the government in 1893. So for over 120 years, the government of Ghana and the people of Ghana have earned revenue from cocoa. And this is all as a result of the actions of Teta Kwashi. We talk about Cocoa Board, and we know all the jobs that have been created. We talk about cocoa farmers. We know the number of families that have benefited from owning cocoa farms and sending their children to school. There's employment. We talk about cocoa roads. We talk about scholarships. Our national brand is strongly identified with our cocoa, the quality of our cocoa beans and chocolate. There's all kinds of spillover industries. We have chocolate factories. We have soap and cream making industries today, and it's all because of the actions of one man, Teta Kwashi. And I think it's completely impossible today to sit and really quantify in numerical terms just the impact and the value that Teta Kwashi has brought to this country. Another example I'd want to bring up is Esther Oklu. She was born in 1919, probably lesser known than Teta Kwashi, but I think a very impactful figure as well. She was a founder of the Women's World Banking in Ghana, which we've collapsed. She was born into poverty, and she had to go away from home to school. And because of that, because the family did not have a lot, she had to figure out how to preserve food she took from home, which she had to eat while she was in school. And just from her own experiences in food preservation, when she was a teenager, she started a food preservation business. She started selling orange marmalade. And from there, she founded this industry, which really is about protecting the value in the food chain. So today we have all these Nkulenu products. And then we have so many other people who have come onto the food preservation value chain without knowing that it all started because one woman pioneered this. Prior to this, no one had tried it, at least not on a commercial basis. So again, with Esther Oklu, we see the value she's brought to the agricultural food chain. The many businesses today that have created employment for people in this industry, the national impact, the employment, very difficult to quantify the impact her work has had on Ghana and on Ghanaian women. And so I think that right now in our audience, we probably have another Teta Kwashi, we probably have another Esther Oklu. But if we do not give them the support that they need, we may not get the value that we can get as a nation or as a continent out of them. Sigmund Freud famously said that if youth knew and if age could, and that's because by the time you get to my age and you know some things, you realize that you cannot do them. You don't have the energy sometimes, even when you know it. And so the only difference really between youth and old age is knowledge. If you know when you're young, then you can do what the older ones cannot do. So I think the youth clearly have the advantage. And it's for this reason that we started Business Compass last year. In engaging young entrepreneurs, we just realized that there was a lot of passion, but all the other elements you needed to create sustainable businesses businesses that could survive generations, businesses that could change the direction of Africa. We didn't see that. And so we thought that they needed some kind of support, they needed mentoring, they needed coaching. And so I'd just like to spend a few minutes and talk about some of the challenges we've seen with youth-owned businesses and how they can, turn this around and really create the kind of development we need for the continent, especially creating employment opportunities for other young people. And I'm going to use the acronym from CAKES because I'm fancy and I like cakes. So I think the first C should stand for capacity. And I'm happy that the speakers who went on before me talked about education, they talked about skills, they talked about getting capacity. You find that a lot of youth who go into business have passion, but the capacity to really make business work is lacking. And so there's some humility that is needed. There's some self-reflection that is needed, and they need to spend some time building capacity. Capacity really determines what you can take. And so you find a lot of them tell you that they need equity, they need money, they need capital. But when you sit and you engage with them, you realize that their businesses are not structured to even contain the kind of capital that they're looking for. And sometimes the numbers are just too small when you're dealing on an African scale. The amounts that the venture capital firms are willing to give out, our firms do not have the capacity to absorb it. So they really need to spend some time upskilling and building capacity. They need to structure their businesses in a way that makes it work. You need to have boards, board of directors, you need to have board of advisors, you need to bring on the capacity that you don't have. And that's what is going to make them attractive to investments and to the banks. I'm sure Kamina would confirm this when he speaks. The other thing they need under the C is collaboration. You find a lot of businesses all replicating the same thing and all working out of tiny shops when they could have pulled their resources together and become bigger. And of course, that also increases your capacity. So we see a lot of unnecessary competition when it should be collaboration. And we need to get past our trust issues. We need to learn how to work as teams, how to come together. And even if you're not doing the same thing, you can do similar things or create your own little business ecosystem, and that puts you in a stronger position to deliver. So we need to learn to value collaboration over competition. I think we've focused too much on competition, and it just makes us hate it, doesn't really help us. And there's a saying that if you want to be incrementally better, you need to be competitive. But if you want to be exceptionally better, you need to be cooperative. And I think the African Continental Free Trade Act also gives them a lot of opportunities to collaborate, not just within their own countries, but across borders. The A stands for attitude, and I think Abna hinted at this. African youth really need to spend time working on their attitude and their values. We see a lack of integrity in a lot of business practices in how they run their business. We see a lot of sharp businesses, which they think is being smart, but which doesn't work for them in the long run. We see a lot of indiscipline. If you're not financially disciplined, it's very hard to be successful with your business. And we also see the quick rich thing is there, but I think that's also the example that they've been shown. So they may need to sit down and re-examine who their role models are, but there's definitely the need to work on attitudes. Ethics matter in business. And the thing about business is you never know who is watching, but somebody's always watching. And you may get away with some things in the short term, but you would not get away with them in the long term. And I think it's also social media. There's such an emphasis on building reputation without building character. So those moral feelings come up eventually. So I think the advice would be that they need to work on that and also recognize that This is a long-term journey. So your core values would always come to play. And really your values, you need to define what your values are, because they're kind of like your guardrails. When you are in a conflict situation, they will tell you which way to go. Are you going to put your employees first? Are you going to put ownership over professionalism? Are you going to have a mindset of continuous improvement? What is your why? Why are you doing the business? Is it to provide something for society, or it is just for personal gain? You need to define all this before you even go into business. The other thing is knowledge. You find that people think that business is a matter of luck, is a matter of a big break, is a matter of having the right connections, but there's also knowledge that you need to run a business successfully. There's the art and the science of business, and you need to learn both to succeed in business. You need to understand finance, you need to understand marketing, you need to understand strategy. There's a science to this. And there's also the art. There's a business language that you need to learn. There's the etiquette of business. So I really want to speak to African youth that you need to really invest in getting knowledge. It's very difficult to go far in business without acquiring basic business skills and knowledge that you need to succeed. I'll move quickly on to the E. The E for me stands for embracing. And there are two things I think people need to embrace. One is technology, and I think Joe spoke to that. Technology helps you overcome a lot of boundaries and do a lot of things that you may have found difficult to do prior to the introduction of technology. And living in a borderless globe like we live in now, there's a lot of borders that technology can help you cross if you embrace it properly. And of course, like Abna said, there are those who are embracing technology for other reasons. Well, let's focus on those who want to do right for today. The other thing I think African youth need to embrace is failure. I think that they listen too many times to a lot of motivational people who only speak to their successes. And it's very easy to focus on the Jeff Bezos and the Bill Gates of this world, but there's so many lessons also learn from failure. And even for those big entrepreneurs, if you probe a bit deeper, you would find that they had several failings before they succeeded. So there's the need to embrace failure, learn from the examples of other people, where they failed and why, and also keep trying and not get discouraged if you try and you fail, just knowing that failure is really a part of the journey to success. And it's very difficult to find success without finding failure. So you need to embrace failure and you need to embrace technology. And the S is for structure. Almost every episode we've had on Business Compass has been a failure of structure. And young people do not really recognize the value of structure. And the fact that you cannot build a sustainable business that is going to go across generations if you do not structure the business properly. There are laws to business. You need to follow those laws. If you do not follow those laws, you cannot even attract financing. Stanbic is not going to give you any money, neither would Absa. So you need to really embrace structure and spend some time on structure and respect the process. There is a process to this, and growth doesn't come overnight. Finally, I'd like to say this. When I talk to a lot of young people, I see them in a hurry to show off the trappings of success. And I found this verse in the Bible, which says, Benjamin shall ravin as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. I think it's very important that when you're young, forget those of us who are older, some of these mistakes may be too late to correct, but there's still time for the young ones. You need to know what is your prey and you need to know what is your spoil. You cannot consume your capital because you want to show off, you want to impress people that you are a success. It's very important that you take your time and you respect the process. You need to know what is your prey, you need to know what is your spoil. Even more importantly, you need to know when is your morning and when is your evening. If you consume your prey your spoils in the morning, you would have nothing for the evening. And so you need to have a very long-term mindset, and you need to appreciate the fact that the work that you're doing as an entrepreneur has generational consequences. You may be the next Teta Kwashi, you may be the next Estelle Clue. There's a lot of value in what you're doing, and Africa needs you. As much as we need the right policies from government and we need all the support from the public and the private sectors, a lot of it is going to depend on the mindset, the attitudes, the skills, and the capacities of the youth of Africa. And if our entrepreneurs are going to lead this change, this development for Africa, we need them to wake up very quickly. We need them to take over the baton. We need them to appreciate the fact that they're holding the legacy of Africa, and the work that they have to do, or the work they're doing, is the solution to the challenges of Africa. And the earlier they take this baton and start this work with a renewed mindset, I think the faster we would speed up to the kind of Africa that we want, which Abna alluded to. So thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you need to know your prey, you need to know your spoil, your morning and your evening. If you're a young man like me and you spend the whole of your morning browsing Facebook and checking WhatsApp messages, checking statuses, I'm sure you have taken something from here. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that is Mrs. Charlotte Osei. Can we please acknowledge her once more? So it's now time for the question and answer session. But let me give you a quick breather. We'll come back right after a few seconds to get into the questions and answers. If you have any question, I'm sure you have prepared it by now. I have written mine here. We'll begin, of course, with myself, and then the ones you bring in, we'll have them before we get into the second session. So stick and stay with us.
Enterprise, your advantage.
You will come back from the break. This is still the 2021 edition of Ishmael Yamson and Associates Business Round Table. So we've gone through the first session of the program, and we are now preparing ourselves for the question and answer session, after which we will come back to the second round. But I have Mami here on the line to give us a brief comment before we begin with the session, question and answer session. So if you can hear us, she is on the line via Zoom. And to introduce her, she is a public health researcher with the Public Health Agency of Canada. She is a policy analyst also with the Government of Canada and a clinical research analyst at the University of Health Network. She would give us a brief comment, maybe about a minute or two, and then, of course, the questions continue. That's part of the discussions we're having this morning. So we are trying to get her on the line. In fact, we had spoken to her earlier, and she's actually online. But you know that when it is virtual, Mrs. Charlotte Osei just spoke about technology as well, embracing technology and setting up structures. So we are going through the process of technology and making sure that the structures are working so that we get her properly online. I will now begin with my question, my very first question, before we get Mami here on the line or on Zoom to give us her comments, and that will be for 2 minutes. But my question, of course, goes to Dr. Abena Asumanin Entry. She is in the field of sanitation. And I remember in about 10 years ago, people were not too much interested in boiler issues and sanitation issues. But now it is a big business. Everybody wants to go into that sector. The youth, of course, want to work in the sector of sanitation. Some time ago, was a place where people didn't want to get into. And people were rushing to make money. And as you spoke about, people are still rushing to make money. How do we make sectors of this sort attractive to the youth? You spoke about agriculture is not attractive to the youth of Ghana and, of course, the whole of Africa, because we think it's for the old people, somebody who is aged, to get into that field. How do we get them into fields such as sanitation, fields such as agriculture? And then I'll come to my next question before I come to the two other presenters.
I'll respond with an example, a real life example. I sit on the board of Blue Skies Foundation.
Right.
And one of the challenges that we have faced over the years, and I think I've been on it for close to a decade now, one of the challenges we've faced over the years has been sourcing of fruits. For a company that employs close to 3,600 people, and most of them are youth, if we have to go outside the borders of Ghana to find fruits, it defeats a certain purpose of business. It means that it increases the cost of production. Something that could go for £1 or 1 CD would have to go for two pounds. And it's sad that when we visited communities where the foundation has had to do some work, we have the old men who own the plantations, very old and tired, where they feel the baton situation that Mrs. Osei mentioned should be happening. But where are the youth to receive the baton? They are all in the cities and they are focused on commerce. You know, they want to sell. If I consider that as part of the ticking bomb situation, where our very sustenance depends on agriculture, and yet we are not paying attention to it. We are not paying attention to manufacturing. I think Ghana is trying to do a bit of that, but at what scale? I'll get to the situation of the sanitation. There is a value chain. That there is collection, there is sorting. If you look at it, there's recycling. Just last week or last 2 weeks, there's a young man doing an amazing thing with using tires for construction. And I thought, but that young man I heard of not just last week, I've heard of him years ago. How many people would be patient enough to go through technology that has been discovered, not yet accepted, trying out something? Who is going to finance, Absa or Stanbic?
Financing is a problem. We'll come to that.
Okay, so for a young person, my issue is that sometimes you want your idea to be seen, but it takes process. This process issue comes into who is coaching you?
And the mentoring.
Yes, mentoring and coaching. Who is coaching you? Who is even, sometimes you don't even have to have the capital to show, but somebody to put in a word to say, I know this young man, he is credible. He started something new. Let's try him with even 10,000 CDs and see. If he does repay, then we can try him with some other, which is, so these are some of the issues that we need talking about in this space. The other thing is that I think in the news this morning, Honorable Haruna Idrisu mentioned that there should be a law made about get rich attitude. Yes, but those who start flaunting affluence, who traditionally now are being, applauded, but we should investigate such people. Because for me, it's a role modeling situation which has gone wrong. Go and ask the people who are being invited to the church fundraiser. They are sitting there, they would give 100,000, but we don't know the source of funds. And yet, these are the people our society celebrates. We are not even celebrating hard work. And young people are observing. And the ticking bomb is that we want to show what we have. Social media is there to show that I have a brand new Mercedes or whatever. It will enhance it. How are we taking them through the process? So these are some of the things that come to mind. Waste management, who wants to do baller?
But now it's attractive.
But that's what I'm trying to say.
Money in the sector.
I
People
get it,
want
but
to work in.
that's what I took you through the value chain. Have you been to any of the sites where waste is being collected?
Yes, I have.
The stink alone is wonderful. How many young people will finish university and say that I want to get on my overalls and go to the waste site, the dumping site, and even source for plastics? And plastics would, right now, that is gold. So the whole value chain situation.
How attractive do you make the industry for people to want to work in the industry? That's my question.
But we must,
for example, for the agri.
Yes.
How attractive? What are the motivations from the banks, for example? Is it for me to put down the jacket and say, I'm going to the farm? I'm putting on the overall and go to the farm.
If I told you that I'm a farmer, would you believe it? I tried a few years ago to make farming sexy. Yes. On social media, I had my pineapple farm shown everywhere. You understand? But I've also worked in the bank. If I stood there and I wasn't wearing a skirt suit and I was wearing my overalls from the farm, people would think, is she all right? Why would you want to finish university and then go to the farm? But that is where we should be putting people, we should be directing people to. Maybe this platform is one of the platforms to use.
Exactly. So let me come to you, Joe. If you are still online and if you can hear me, Joe joined us from Kenya. This is a question to your presentation. And of course, when I'm done, I'll come to Charlotte and then we can open up the whole of the space for everybody to come in. You talk about the gap between learning and earning. And of course, the gap between our educational system and employment system. We agree that there is a very wide gap, industrialization, but there is also the problem of the private sector, or even the public sector, the industries and the employers accepting people from the schools for internship purposes, for training purposes, taking on our educational system and putting in the structure you want for the curriculum, so that the people come from the schools and they're able to do what you want them to do. People come and they are not even able to write a memo, simple memo. So there is a disconnect. From your point and from the programs that you have done in Kenya and the support and the mentoring programs that you have done, how are we able to resolve this challenge?
Yeah. So thanks. I guess that was one of the key points in my presentation, challenging the private sector, that you have to show up and get to the center and decide that you are going to take these interns, you are going to listen to the young people, you are going to be involved in crafting the right programs to make sure that the skills that are needed are actually what young people will have before they come out. So if a lot of people, I think, just pay lip service, but if the commitment starting from the people around this table is that your internship program will be formalized, and I think Abna did mention that not, having people, you're not paying them, you don't pay attention, you don't listen to them. I had an intern who is now my chief of staff. She's a super smart lady, and I can see what she's brought to Deloitte. So I think you just need to have the passion and the desire that that's what you want to do. There's no rocket science about that.
Right. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you on that, but let me come to Mrs. Charlotte Osei on your presentation as well. I think with all the points that you have raised, I was going to come to you about the financing, but once we have Kwame here, when we get there, the interest rates and the borrowing, you borrow at very high interest rates compared to other countries, and we still want to expand our system for the youth who want to get into startups and all that. But the will from leadership to ensure that the structures you talk about, the understanding of the youth you talk about, do we have that will in our current system or in the African environment? As in, I wanted to put it as in political will. We are not having the structure. I don't want us to get into the arena of politics, but
you better not.
The structures Yes, exactly. The structures are such that leadership should be shown, and you have stated that your current dispensation hasn't done much. So you get where I'm coming from now.
I think when we say leadership, I'm not sure why the focus is solely on political leadership. I think there's different kinds of leadership that should be shown. I've not mentioned the churches. The faith-based organizations also need to show leadership by emphasizing values that are correct and values that will lead us to the kind of future we want, and not the values they are currently showcasing and celebrating. On the personal, yes, the private sector has a lot of work to do. The banks have to get to the point where they recognize that if they don't support the young entrepreneurs to build up skills and capacity, they may not even have people to lend to. And so that coaching, that mentoring is really important. But I also think that on the individual level, there is so much we can all do. Even from what examples are we showing? How are we managing our own businesses? I've been running a law firm for years now, and at a point I realized that I could not get the capacity I wanted coming out of the law schools. And so I had to start teaching my own group. I lectured for several years at the University of Ghana, but now every other Friday, I have a group of young lawyers who join me on Zoom, and I take them through the basics of company secretarial practice, commercial law. Eventually we'll get into transactions, because some of those things you can't learn in law school. Sometimes you get into work and you don't have the time. You don't have a 5-year timeline like some of us had to learn those things. You need to get those skills very quickly. And the only way is to gather them and teach them. So the leadership has to be shown on all levels. The older ones need to be ready to give. And the younger ones also need to be ready to receive. You would be surprised that you can extend invitations for learning programs, and very few young people, even if it is free, are going to sign up. They'll rather watch you dancing on TV or some other silly thing. So that mindset to receive and the willingness to learn must also be there.
Right. Thank you very much. So that does it for my round of questions. So we will pick up questions from, of course, our studio audience as well, and those on Zoom and on Facebook, wherever you are. The floor is now open for any question at all that you have. It's about the development of the youth to take over the reins of leadership, the reins of business development and all that, not only political, but economic. And of course, I have other guests here in the studio. Kwamena Asmanin is the Chief Executive Officer of Stanbic Bank, and Sheila is also a former Chief Executive Officer of NAPTEX. They will be doing their presentations in the next round, but they can add up commentaries as well. If you have any, you can put them across. Briefly, not your presentation though. So, Kwame.
I think we've had a very engaging session. Thank you very much to all the speakers. They made our work quite difficult for us, but you could look at it as being easy. But I think the key takeaway for me is that each of the speakers have touched on the 3 H's, the head, the heart, and the hands. I think that is what makes a complete being. And I think that, you know, if the youth is listening, it speaks to a more holistic approach to development, not just the academics, not just, you know, the values, and not just, you know, the ability to do stuff with your hands. Taking all the 3 H's together, it's quite important. So I think it sets a framework for us to expand these discussions as the morning evolves. So it's been a good session. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Sheila. Let's take a quick word from you, and then we can go to our audience.
Yeah, I think it's been good. A lot has been said that is very useful to the way we nurture the business environment. I think we also have to pay attention to the cost of doing business and the barriers to doing business, because that is one of the things that kill a lot of innovation. There are a lot of young people, a lot of startups that have very good ideas, and sustaining those ideas through the barriers of doing business is one of the things that makes them give up, because they can't keep going at each barrier. So we need to also be quite clear on what are the barriers currently existing and what are the barriers that increase the cost of doing business for startups. And then we need to engage with the relevant institutions to intervene and give them protection, just like they give the big, capable businesses some tax breaks. Maybe we need that kind of protection for startups until they can stand on their feet. So I think that
the Ghana Startup Act is still not gotten to Parliament yet, still going through a number of problems to even get to Parliament and, of course, get a consideration. If we have any question on Zoom or on Facebook, we can put them up now. There were quite a number of them after the first presentation. So if we can get our technicians to project them, we'll take them right away. Sure. You can.
I think that we are sort of turning into the space of the youth-driven discourse as only business. It's not necessarily business. I think that I would give an example. Socialization is one of the things that I think is very critical to this discussion. I taught ethics not too long ago, and I was giving some examples of how students should conduct themselves in certain environments, even if you worked in the public sector where under table, transactions can, and they actually laughed at me, and I thought, look, this is not how everybody, there's this discussion of, there's a gap between academia and industry, gap between that. But frankly, we should look at where the source is. By the time you get to university and we are discussing ethics, your mother and your father should have done some work to say that it's wrong to steal. So that academia with great interventions and theories and whatever will just come and add on to it. If a young person is at 21 or 22 and they laugh at thievery as, why is this a big deal? Then we need to look at such things as well, because the youth-driven Africa that we want and youth-centered development, I think is not only about that. That leadership is also going to start, as Madam Charlotte said, from the home.
From the home. The parents have quite a work to do, not just the schools and the business environment. So if we have the questions ready, or if there is any comments again, yes, please.
So good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dr. Issen. I'm the head of business development international for Stanbic Bank.
Right.
The question is, it appears we talk down on the youth. We place emphasis on tell, you have to do this. As leaders, and we talked about handing the baton back, do we as role models ask the question, or do we, want of a better word, who's actually looking after the role models in making sure the youth are doing what's right by them? And maybe this is to Charlotte, because you made mention of the baton.
I understood the question. I'm trying to. I'm actually trying to. So the point is?
It's about accountability.
Okay.
As leaders, as role models,
okay,
are we setting the good example for the youth to follow? Thank you.
You're going to make me not behave myself very well.
Honestness.
Yes, but
Right.
because I think I was very clear that I did not think that the generations before had given the youth fantastic examples to follow. I think there's been a failing of leadership on every level, honestly, whether it's traditional, whether it's religious, whether it's political, whether it's business. See, even if we come down to the business level, a lot of the mistakes you see young business entrepreneurs replicating is because that's the examples they saw with the ones ahead. And so the youth also have to be very careful in who they choose as role models, and they need to really get their mindset right. Are you running a marathon or you're running a sprint? If you know it's a marathon, then you really need to be very discerning in who you decide to follow. I would wish that older leaders would have a mindset that is more respectful of young people, which would lead to more inclusive conversations. I think that would actually make more progress that way. I don't see a lot of inclusive,ness, and this mindset of age knowing does not mean that youth don't know anything. So we need to look at it very carefully. And I always say that nobody is too small for you to learn from. And so the mindset adjustment needs to come from both sides. But I'm telling the youth, you better grab this baton because you don't have a lot of time. And I do think we failed, in all honesty. Even when it comes to the issue of values, I would be really honest. There was a time when I pondered very deeply about whether my parents had done me right and my siblings with the kind of values they put in us. I lost my last parent in 2019, but until then, I knew that there was a certain level of wealth. If I showed that or I had it, I would still need to explain. And so if you live in a society where people seem to get away with a lot of things, at some point you start questioning yourself and asking, was I really brought up right? Or these people just set me up for disappointment and pain? And I had to ask that because I had to also ask, what values am I passing on to my children, and not to pass on generational mistakes? It's very difficult to bring up children in the society, because if you're putting some values in them, it's almost as if society is countering that every day. So there's a conflict every day. And it's every day you need to gather them and remind them of the values before they go out, because what they see is exactly, and what is celebrated is. So we have a lot of work to do as a society, even in defining our values. There are things we pay lip service to, but I do not see it in our actions, whether in our religious organizations or in our business world. And there's this sense that, for instance, if you're a Christian, you're expected to be a Christian between the hours of 7 a.m. and midday on Sunday. And as soon as you get into the church car park and you start driving on the street, you can insult, you can misbehave, and the church would collect any kind of money you bring in without questioning the source of that money. So there's a lot of values in our society. We think that chiefs selling the same land, or family heads selling the same plot of land to different people, is a problem of the people and not a problem from the chiefs who are doing the multiple sales. We have accepted this as a society, that the chief would sell the same land several times. And so I need to hire my land guards. We have issues.
I remember I had an incident like that. I had to go buy a land, and then sub-chiefs of the chief told me, either you run in to come and start putting up your projects early enough, or you get land guards to protect the lands for you. And one was bold to tell me this land has been sold already to another person who is in the US.
But these are leaders.
Yeah, exactly.
At that level, that's level of that community. Those are the leaders. So what are the young people in that community learning from?
And the young people are the land guards.
And so when they become chiefs, what are they going to do differently? We've groomed them.
Yeah. I mean,
so, yes,
well, to the same point of accountability, Doctor, I would say that there are three levels for me, whether we are talking at the level of the nation or at the level of a firm or any organization. I think it starts with clarity in the focus of the organization, because it gives young people a hook on which to build. The second level for me has to do with the investments that, whether as a country or as an organization or a firm, the leaders then consistently make in developing the capacity of young people to take over the baton, to actually build the kinds of innovation, the kinds of ideas that will actually take us forward, whether we're speaking as a country or we're speaking as an organization. And the last thing for me is the ambition. Too often, the ambition itself is not there. And so we're not consistently able to say that, yes, we want to be at the top table in the world. We've spoken a lot about agriculture. And I always say to people, it is true that we have the most undeveloped land and we have the largest untapped brain power. So what if Africa said we want to feed the world? Now, Everything that goes into that, from farm to mechanization, to industrialization, to value chains, you name it, whether it is finance, whether it is education, whether it is logistics, everything is tied around a very clear focus to feed the world and a very great ambition to be the leader in feeding the world. But we have not come to that. 40 years ago, we were the basket case. People were singing, heal the world to feed Africa, isn't it? Wouldn't it be great if in 10 years' time, we are truly the breadbasket of the world? But the clarity of focus is not there. The ambition is not there. And in the 40 years between heal the world and today, we have not made the right investment. So we are still dancing around agriculture, but nothing looks like it's going to happen until and unless we take that decision now. If Asia took 30 years to turn themselves around, with all the capacity in the world today, I'm sure in 10, 15 years, we too can. But we need to address these things, these three things. Well, that's my starting point, the clarity of focus. We need to have that.
So Mike. Right, so we need to have a clarity of focus. I understand we have some questions on Zoom. So producer, if you can help us, let's have the very first question. Okay, so like I said earlier on, we are still going through the technical problem. So we'll go for a quick break. When we are back, we will see the questions that we have, and then we can go ahead.
Anywhere you dare can be get out.
Akosia, I'm awful. I have to go deposit some money at the bank and buy some things at the mall.
Okay, but deposit money at this time. Which bank is still open?
Oh, Akosia. With a Stanbic ATM, even without your debit card, you can deposit money at the ATM. And you know the ATM doesn't close. It is 24/7.
Oh, wow. That's good, oh. You know, as for me, when I close late, I have to carry the money on me home with all the rest. And sometimes even when I'm asleep and I hear mosquitoes making noise in my ears, I have to wake up and check if the money is still there.
Oh, Akosia, don't make me laugh.
I'm serious, baby. It's not easy for me at all.
Mean cable.
Hey, Beje no kobi view.
I'm off to the mall now.
Tap into the convenience of Absa Contactless cards, another innovation that's turning banking on its head. Now, you can make fast, easy, and safe contactless payments for everyday items. That's Africanacity. That's Absa.
Right, so you're welcome back from the break. This is still the 2021 edition of Business Roundtable, brought to us by Ishmael Yamson and Associates, and obviously powered by Metro TV. I've told you that we are coming your way live from our studios here at Rage in Accra. We are live on DSTV channel 277. We are live on our Facebook page, Ishmael Jansen and Associates, and we are live on YouTube and on Zoom. I currently have the questions from Zoom. Unfortunately, we are not able to allow you to ask directly, but you can still type them. We'll get them and read it for our guests. And let me also quickly introduce to you that you see me standing now because we have one more guest joining us now. She is in the person of Mrs. Abena Osei Puku, the Managing Director of Absa Bank Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly welcome Abena Osei Puku. So maybe the camera, of course, you can see her now in the shot. We would ask a few questions that have come from our participants online to our guests, and then we can quickly get into the next session. The first, I'll take 3 questions at a time. I'm sure they haven't exactly stated which of our panel members the questions are directed to. However, any of them may be able to answer. And we still have Joe Ishen online from Kenya. So Joe, if you are there, I'm sure you can pick up some of the questions as well. I'll read the very first one, and it says, how ready or well-equipped are the youth in Africa to drive economic development? I'm sure you may have gotten an answer in the course of the discussion on that one already. Number 2, what steps can be taken to ensure the youth sit up to ensure the economic growth in Africa? And question number 3, do you believe that politics is also a major factor hindering economic growth and accumulation of wealth? So these are the first 3 questions I have for or from our participants online. So I'll throw this up to all of us, maybe beginning from you, Michael, and then we still have Joe. So Joe, after Michael, I'll come to you. Or let me go to Joe because Joe hasn't spoken for a time now. So Joe, if you heard the 3 questions put up to us by our participants, kindly help us. So let's go over to Kenya now.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Let me take the first one. And it's an interesting one. How ready is the youth? I think it's mixed. There are some young people who are ready. Others are not ready because of our own fault. And the reasons why some are not ready stems from some of our own values and cultural backgrounds. I remember Michael last week telling you that it's very frustrating, some of the culture of this is my junior in school, I'm the senior, and they take it to the workplace. But this is a small boy, that's small boy, small girl concept. And you'll be surprised how it suppresses a young person's who's ready's ability to jump. I do think that for those who are ready, we need to make sure that we support them to get a right platform to shine. And the right platform comes from some of the points I've mentioned. Financing in agriculture is key. And I have to state that if you have young people who want to go into agriculture, but you have banks who do not have people understanding the agricultural sector, how can you fund a sector that you don't understand? So that in itself is a different challenge. I do think that a lot of the banks are changing. They are getting more and more people understanding the sector to help them fund. But we need to move faster to make sure that those who are ready can be supported to demonstrate the power that they have. So I think it's a mix. Some are ready, some are not ready, and we have to do more to make sure that those who are ready gets the support to move ahead.
So yes, those who are ready should get the support to move ahead. And of course, those who are not ready should be motivated enough. But Michael, you want to add something?
Yeah, let me pick up on that point about getting the support. I mean, I grew up in a corporate environment that talked a lot about leadership competencies and made it very clear what leadership, how you lived leadership competency. And so as a young person in that business, you had a framework that guided you. And so if you had the ambition, you knew exactly what you ought to be delivering, and you also knew exactly how you should go about delivering. And I think that is part of the learning that we fail to give to young people, or young people sometimes are not ready to imbibe. In my own business, for me, it's a straightforward matter. We have roles. Mine is to set the agenda. and it is for the young people in the business to deliver. And I always tell them, I'm going to get out of your way, and I'm certainly going to allow you to do your very best. I mean, at my age, all the technology and the ideas and the razzle dazzle you're seeing here clearly is not from me. The concept is from me, but all the beauty that we see, the way in which we've brought people together and we are using technology, even the speakers, I got very little voice in choosing the speakers because they said thou shalt. And once theirs was the execution, it was for me to allow them to execute and just make sure that we got the talent that we have at the table. So I think we also need to be brave about giving space for young people to actually get into that business of demonstrating their capacity as leaders, demonstrating their capacity to execute. And like Charlotte said, if youth knew and age could. So because we know, unfortunately, we know, but we can't. So ours is to shape and guide and do so in a very practical way, a very consistent way, and get out of the way. The young people, they have the ability, and theirs is the right fit for these times. Unfortunately, too many old people are still trying to be on the dance floor, and it's breakdance time. It's breakdance time.
Yeah. Right. So
I think that the discussion goes beyond just the ageism thing. It's also sexism. It's a whole lot. There are so many barriers. 2019, I applied for a job which was bigger than me, but I'm an ambitious young woman. And when I entered the room and I saw the panel, first of all, the first question was, so are you a doctor? Do we refer to you as what? Doctor or what?
Or young lady.
Immediately, they try to psychologically put you down. And then the next thing was that this other woman, how old did you say you are again? And when I mentioned my age, oh, she left university at the time that you were born. Immediately, so there's this consistent, and every effort I made as a young person, they made me know. And somebody even said that, this is Impenyufo rule. They want somebody who's old. I'm capable, but no, it doesn't matter. You understand? And then there was a question at some point, have you given birth? Because sometimes when you employ the young ladies and they come soon, they start having children and they disrupt.
They have to go on maternity leave.
Exactly. So it's not an ageism battle we are fighting alone. It's sexism, it's lookism if we have, because some people see the way you look and obviously they say, well, she must be a slave queen, so she has no brain. I still can't understand why I have a PhD. People see me and they find that you are really a doctor? Why? Why? Doctor title is for certain people. It's so we have too many barriers which must be addressed. That around the table, I was very happy when the invitation came and I looked at the people who were going to be around the table and I saw women. And I was very happy. And last week was very indicative to me that I could belong here. When we came for the trials, the test, and we all related very well. A typical environment which is charged with these barriers I'm talking about, somebody's going to look at you, she's a young lady. Oh, this one too is too old. Oh, Charlotte has been this before.
Yeah.
These are all barriers. And I think that if we are going to talk, we should talk about it because these are the things, the perceptions we have. That's how come somebody wants to be a farmer after school. But we are looking at a graduate from University of Ghana or KNUST as not fitting somebody who should be a farmer. Who is born a farmer, really? We should have people who are wearing suits, taking investors around their farms to say, this is what I want to do. And if they don't want to be in those kinds of suits, we should allow them to be. And that is what the youth are looking for, that we can still dream beyond us and be allowed to be what we want to be.
Right. Abna, you had wanted to make a point. Of course, you haven't had your bite yet or your presentation yet, but just a quick one and then I can go.
Good morning, Chrissy, and our viewers across the world. I think Abna has said a lot, but I just wanted, to raise an observation. As I got in this morning, I also realized that maybe the first lesson learned personally was that we should have also had some youth representation, around the table. Of course, Charlotte is youth for the day amongst all of us. But I think it goes to the point around creating those opportunities, right? So we're here talking about youth and youth-driven and centered, development, and it would have been great, if we had a few of them, not just as observers, but actually around the table, so we can also listen to their perspectives. And I think if there's one thing that we should all be doing going forward is to include them, and that would be a practical example of how we get them on board.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Abina Osei Puku for you. We'll be getting her presentation very soon. But for now, we'll get to the second round of presentations. And if I have the producer's permission, we will be getting ourselves prepared. So I'll introduce my next presenter, and she is in the person of Mrs. Sheila Buama. And I'll go into a bit of her details before we actually get her to speak for now. But I'm told I have to pick the very last question that I have here to get answers for it before we come to you, Sheila. So the very last question I have for this session is, please tackle the topic of youth and environmental management. That's very plain, but I don't know if you have anything to add.
I think that I may be a bit biased in my discussion, but it's fair, yes. I think that the discussion of environmental degradation and climate change issues, really, we have not hammered enough on. And that's why in my presentation, I thought we should talk about it. We cannot have any Africa if we continue to rape our land the way we are doing. And I talk about Galamsey, and I said, well, very soon we'll have a miracle in Western region where we'll be walking on the sea. It won't be biblical anymore. It would be a thing that actually, because we have so much sand and in our water bodies, and we've destroyed so much. Now, the issue of young people in environmental management and stuff, I think that if I were to speak on behalf of government, I think that the involvement of young people, even in the discussion of environmental issues, is key. I think last month there was a forum that engaged miners, both legal and illegal miners and everything. And I observed in the room that it was the chiefs, the unions, the associations, everybody gave their take on how we are destroying our environment. And I did not hear from illegal miners like Galamseyers who would just come and stand there and say, I'm a proud Galamseyer. Yes, I may be doing something illegal, but this is the reason why I'm doing it. And for which reason, if even you ban my tractors, I will go back. For me, that's where the discussion starts, because government may do a whole lot, but the people who are affected negatively, who are the youth, who may be destroying the future that we all depend on, are not being included in the discussion. The other issue also is that, like Charlotte mentioned earlier, we have this thing about if you are old, you are wise, that we've all told that line. And I don't know when we are going to break it. Maybe other speakers can give a take on it. But environmental management issues, right from littering, if somebody threw something around on the floor, and if you are a young person to even tell this person that it's wrong to litter, that would be a problem. And you'll be shocked that other older people around you say, young person as you are, you should not be speaking like this to an older person, even though they've littered. We need to start talking at different points that we allow young people, not only in environmental management, as in the practice of it, but even the policy, to get this discussion around on the continent generally.
Right. So we'll take a quick break and we'll prepare ourselves for Sheila's presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back.
They call me Kwame Short. You can open a CalBank Snap account in 3 easy steps. First, select your transaction, then provide your details, and finally, confirm your transaction with your fingerprint. It's that convenient and secure. You can find CalBank agents everywhere. Shops, general merchants, pharmacies, mobile money agents, and supermarkets.
CalBank Agent Banking, your neighborhood bank. Forward together.
Tap Step into the convenience of Absa Contactless cards, another innovation that's turning banking on its head. Now, you can make fast, easy, and safe contactless payments for everyday items. That's Africanacity. That's Absa.
Well, you're welcome back from that quick break. This is still the 2021 edition of Business Roundtable, and so we'll go straight into the next presentation as I had introduced to you earlier on. And the person coming to do this for us, I would go a bit into her background. She has an experience that cuts across the United Nations, the private sector and the public sector, and she has been working with agencies related to education delivery in Ghana over the past 7 years. Her work with the youth started in 2014 when she joined the Student Loan Trust Fund, SLTF, as a Chief Executive Officer. During the period, she worked closely with key stakeholders, including student bodies, to develop and implement innovative interventions aimed at reducing barriers to education financing. Her later role as the first female executive secretary of the National Board for Professional and Technician Examination, NAPTEX, also resulted in a significant promotion of quality education along the TVET value chain. And so this is a person that has a vast experience when it comes to matters of the youth and education and, of course, youth development. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mrs. Sheila Na-Buama.
Panelists, distinguished audience joining us from various parts of the globe, ladies and gentlemen. Keeping a discussion going after a heavy dose of good content is usually the speaker's challenge. And so for me to start this presentation, I would want us to merge our emotions with the discussions, the passion we have shown so far. I'm going to mention a couple of countries, and I want you to think about a picture and a feeling. Let's see Dubai, what comes to mind? Let's move to Singapore, what comes to mind? Let's go to Germany, what comes to mind? Let's go to Congo, what comes to mind? Let's draw closer to Nigeria. What is the image and the feeling? Let's end up in Togo. What is the image and the feeling? I want to believe that the last three and the first three images and feelings are the reason why we are sitting here. We are closer to the issues by the fact that they affect us irrespective of where we sit across the globe of Africa. I am informed that Ishmael Yamson and Associates is doing this for the 8th time, and I wish to commend them highly for their choice of topic. It looks like they are mastering the act of picking topics that resonate with the youth on the continent. And this year has been no different. As a group, we believe that any country that gets this right would offer useful lessons to the rest of us to follow in our quest for addressing the many issues that have also been discussed by colleague speakers. So I'm going to be looking at the issue from the point of emphasizing value addition to Africa's human capital. We all know that the general theme for the program is youth-driven and youth-centered development, Africa's future. The topic for me was very challenging to prepare for. And it was challenging for many reasons, because as a continent, even though we have similar profiles when it comes to population, economic, social, and cultural, the constraint of financial capacity and what have you to deal with the issue is one of the biggest challenges we have to overcome. And so in trying to situate my presentation, I'm going to look at it from the point of the evolution of development and our economic fortunes. I'm also going to look at the role of education. I would look at the opportunities to harvest, and then I would go to the gaps to overcome, and I would conclude. Considering the center stage these issues are taking, anyone monitoring the news on BBC, Joy FM, City, Metro, and the many other social media platforms would see that there is a lot of youth-centered issues, especially ones that concern the unrest and arrest of citizens across the globe. We would hear of unrest in Nigeria and arrest. We would hear of the issue of Mali, and we would hear of the issue of our own country not too long ago. So it tells you, like other colleagues have said, that there is a lot of pressure building up, and we better take some proactive measures sooner rather than later. This is the resource map of Africa. We are all proud to be part of a continent that is so endowed with natural resources. We are endowed with many things, including oil, gold, and cash crops. A lot of things are endowed in the land we sit on. Unfortunately, when it comes to indicators that measures the quality of our very existence, poverty, health, education, water, electricity, waste management, we score very poorly. And so, some people have gone on to rename us. I was listening to a lot of research, and one of the speakers at Oxford said the sleeping giant, and they were talking about Africa. It is not uncommon to go for international or national forums and hear Ghanaians or Africans even talk about Africa as the dark continent. So it tells us that irrespective of the fact that we have a lot, there is still a lot of expectation of us. And that is why the negative ways that we are labeled. We have to look at the population we have for what it is. So some 50 years ago, the population of Africa was 360 million people. And today we are 1.37 billion people. Everybody has been talking about the population of Africa and how fast it is growing. And that is true, but what is the quality of the population that we possess? And we know that gold is what we have, but the value of gold dust is not the same as the value of the processed gold. And so even though processed gold, which is processed outside the continent, commands luxury prices and is categorized as luxury, the gold dust itself does not command any valuable market price. And it's the same for the human resource. So the human resource base of Africa is massive, but what is the quality of that human resource, and how does the market price that human resource? There will be no magic about the pricing of labor. It has to be processed to be able to attract the prices that are competitive nationally and globally. So indeed, emphasizing on the concept of value addition to Africa's human capital, it's as important as discussing their involvement and integration in the development that we have. And when you look at, there is nothing that we would say here that is new. In fact, you don't have to be, we have gone past the time where somebody says something and it's only the person has monopolistic rights to that information. There is so much information these days, the need to reproduce information is no more an asset to have. So it's not going to be surprising that 50 years ago, a similar group like ours, with the intention of planning for today, had sat down and started planning for how their Africa should look like. By virtue of the fact that we are sitting here today, re-examining the same topic tells us that we may not have done too well in planning for a generation ahead. What are we expected to do? Now in Ghana, I'm going to use a lot of information from Ghana. And what I have noticed looking at the data from other African countries is that there is very
strong similarities between the profile, population, economic, social of Ghana and many other African countries. And so if I use graphs for Ghana, you would find it quite similar in terms of the way it is shaped when you look at it from other sources. And it's very good that these days, information is available to everybody from a continental perspective or from a world perspective. So in Ghana, 50 years ago, we were just 8 million people. And today we are a little above 31 million people estimated. When you look at the profile of our population, you would notice that over 97% of the population is below the ages of 50. It is only 3% of our population that is 60 and above. And so these are the things that are worrying. When you look at the profile of unemployment vis-a-vis the profile of the population, you would see why the youth are building up so much pressure, because most of their youthful time is wasting away, like other colleagues have talked about. So when we talk about the youth, what is our definition of the youth? So I just went to the UN to look at their definition of the youth. And their definition of the youth is very interesting, because they will state in their definition that the youth is the bracket age between 15 and 24. But they are quick to add that the definition of youth between the ages of 15 and 24 is a statistical tool for planning. But for the purposes of a discussion like us, they encourage us to define the youth as a transition between childhood dependence to adulthood independence. It is not surprising to find a 60-year-old who has never been meaningfully engaged calling themselves youth, because in their head, they are still not independent. So it conforms with the definition that the UN has given. So the real resources of Africa, it is people. We say this over and over and over and over again. And for me, the people are as important to us as the value they bring to us. Now, value for any of us would know that it's an accumulation of many things, which we can all sum into as investment. So it is, the value is driven of the human being, is driven by the investment made in the person from birth. And I like what other speakers recognize, that we cannot look at the issue of empowering or youth-centered development from the middle or from the top. We would have to look at it from birth, because research again has shown that between the ages of birth and 5, that is the most crucial part of brain development for children. In our parts of the world, Africa, when I say, what are we doing with children that age? And as we continue to run through the slides, we would see where I'm going to. So the youth of Africa are largely unemployed, and many of them are wasting away. And the fact that the world around us is changing fast may not be, and that we are not responding enough is not lost on anybody. What is lost on us is the impact of the stage we are in the global development on this population that we have medium to long term. So available, and in trying to prepare for it, I must admit it was a very difficult topic. I said, where am I starting from? It's all glaring in our face. So I decided to look at where were we at the time of colonization. So between the 1950s and the 1975, that was when many African countries gained independence. But where was the world at the time that we were taking over the affairs of our country? The world was in its third industrial revolution. And what did that mean? That meant that in some parts of the world, computers were in existence, automation was already in use, people have gone to space, robots were in use, computer programming were already advanced, and they were using them for production of goods. So the third industrial revolution, at the point at which we joined, was very crucial. How did we join, and what did we do when we joined? So you would realize from now that, and many people would say, that education was given to us to make us administrative clerks so that we would support the vision of our colonial masters. What did we do significantly to alter that to respond to the era we have taken over education-wise. You know, we are all very aware that across the continent, not much altering happened to the type of education that was given or left for us. Today, as we speak, the world is in its fourth industrial revolution, and that means a lot to the world around us. How are we responding? And to see how we are responding, I would want us to look at some figures. And for me, like I said, figures from Ghana mimic what happens in other African countries. And so we'll look at Ghana's GDP production over the past 5 years. And if anybody can see the graph very well, these are the 3 sectors that drive GDP in Ghana. And for those of us who are not economics based, GDP is the final value of the goods and services produced within the country in a given year. So all our productive efforts put together from services, from manufacturing, and from industry would sum up together to give us how we are doing. And we are all aware that the service industry is what is currently driving our growth. Now, this is important because employment, inclusion, participation is not going to happen outside the domain of our productive sectors. If we are going to have our youth participate in decent work, in decent opportunities across the globe, then it must originate from the openings or opportunities in the growth of these sectors. Now, if you look at the growth of these sectors, it's interesting because the service sector, there's additional information that breaks down the various contributions that goes into our growth in service, our growth in industry, and our growth in the third one is manufacturing. So this is the growth in agri, and a lot of my earlier colleagues have talked about agri. And so, yes, in preparing for this, I have bounced some very important topics around some of my friends who are in academia, in ILO, and one of them said to me, we need structural reforms, which moves away from the import to export to agri transformation, using value addition and processing to domestic consumption and export. Then some of the processes within the value chain can be digitalized. This way, we can attain efficiency through digitalization whilst creating more jobs for the youth. So what to do is not lost on us. Why are we not doing it is the question. And that is what is bringing us here 50 years again to understand what can we do. So agric mechanization is one of the things we know would move us from subsistence agriculture that we have been forever to be able to feed the world, like Michael said. We have to grow our niche around our strengths. And if you look at the continent of Africa, one of the things that we are known to have is a climate that is good and vast lands. And so if we really want to feed the world as our niche and feed the world with organic food, and again, this is very important because for those who have traveled, if you go into the shops, you would find that organic food command a higher price. And so if we are going into the market to command for the purposes of value addition, then we should be going to the area that targets high value, just like the gold is categorized as a premium luxury commodity. Our agri must also command some premium prices to help us lift our situation a bit up. So not too long ago in 2020, people in the agri sector sat to talk about investment needed in agri mechanization. So this tells you that we are still doing a lot of the talking. And for me, what would make a difference for a conference like this is having done all the talking, that some relevant institutions will take some of the good ideas and look at how they can operationalize them. And beyond operationalization, that the organizers, Ishmael Yamson and Associates, would take note and follow up and give us an update so that we would feel the satisfaction of contributing our effort and our time to building some of the solutions that we need. We cannot all be wrong if we are all saying the same thing. The magic is in our agriculture. So what is the place for education? Of course, it's easy for everybody to think that the issue is education. And yes, a great value is placed on education because the processing of the human being education is what processes the human being's capacity. So education cannot be left out of a discussion as important as this. Education, we must start from birth. And when I talk about education, I'm not talking about the international or the private schools that the privileged have opportunity to attend. I'm talking about the Choco local primary school, where everybody else's child goes to school. And so the issues of quality at that level is what really drives the entire population, because how many of us, what segment of the population is capable of paying the Cambridge or international schools school fees? So if we get it right with our basic education at Choco Junior or local primary school, we are getting it right for the areas where majority of our children would be accessing what it takes to participate effectively in a fourth revolution era. We have all not lost fact of the fact that we need decent jobs for our youth. Again, we know many of our youth are in job categories we would call underemployment or disguised unemployment. Whatever you choose to do, we have to deal with that problem. And in a fourth industrial revolution, how are we going to deal with a problem of different segments of the population needing different skill set to function? And that is why I brought the two trains. The train from Ghana may be a third industrial revolution technology, and the train from Singapore is artificial intelligence driven. And for anybody who has visited Singapore, you would sit in that train and there is just a human being sitting there, but it is self-driven. So a lot of the things that are going to shape our world, especially with the experience of COVID, does not give us the luxury to drag our feet, because the global marketplace is now borderless. And we can sit in our room and order the most efficient and the most cost-effective commodity from any part of the world. Now, how do we protect businesses in Ghana when the virtual world has opened up this much? So the competition now really is not one where we can protect businesses that are small, that lack capital. We've spoken about all the barriers, that do not have capacity to compete, that do not have the right technologies to produce at scale, that do not have a market, and all the challenges they have to. How are we going to stop somebody from bringing their goods from Alibaba or another place because of the price difference? So these are the real issues that are going to speak to the core of our job creation and the opportunities we have for the youth. Now, the other slide I would be quite interested in is in the service slides. The service, we all know, across Africa is driving our various industries. And we want to be happy because then our citizens must be getting jobs. But when you break down the details, you would notice that the one that is up is the service that is driven by trade. And so that is, again, a problem, because if our service industry, which is the biggest driver of our GDP, is driven by trade, those jobs are not created here. We may at best get some import taxes from them. If we want to create jobs and opportunities for the people here, then we have to restructure this contribution in the disaggregated information. You would expect that the financial services sector would be contributing more. Currently, it does only about 2%. I was surprised to see that the tourism sector is doing virtually very, very small. So these are all gaps, but the opportunities to create jobs for people who are available to us and who can actually participate meaningfully in the development of African countries. The gaps to cross are many. Now, you would realize that a lot of people have spoken about a disconnect between education and industry. And it is something that I have heard many, many times. But for me, I look at the issue differently. If you are a parent who has encountered the Cambridge education and the GS education, at the basic level, you would find that there is something fundamentally missing at the GS level, which is the type of the delivery methodology. So for those who are doing the A level, and I took my time to look at this carefully, for those who are doing the private school curriculum, you would find there's a lot of problem solving built into their delivery methodology at the very basic level. You will find critical skills development. You will find public speaking. They are asked to go and do projects and come and defend them. They are asked to do debates. These are the things that are missing in our public basic schools. And they are missing because it's not a costly thing to do, to re-change the way education is delivered at the basic level. But it may have to do with the class sizes as well. It's something that we can work on if we are interested in building children from the start that are solution-oriented, that are critical thinkers, that do not find value in regurgitating information because that is no more necessary. The internet would put information at your doorstep. What the 21st century individual must do is how to think and solve the problem. But that is what we are still not correcting along our education value chain. So we are producing a lot of very beautiful certificates, but asking them to solve problems within their environment or to be able to even see the problems and find them as opportunities is a big problem. But when you look at this slide, it says the devil is in the details. So as Ghana, we have a population of 31 million, and it's only a little above 25% that have a tertiary education. Now, this has a big implication on the entire population. So it means that in many households, the parents do not even have higher degrees. That in many households, the average parent is either a primary school dropout or a secondary school dropout. Again, we are aware that if we have to solve this problem, we have to solve it from the basic level. 0 to 5, what is the capacity of the parents to support the child even at that time before they get into school? So it's not that kind of problem that you can pin a solution at one place and that is it, bingo, you have it. You need to take cognizance of the dynamics of our population, and if we need to provide extra homework support areas for children coming from illiterate homes, so that somebody who is literate can look at the homework and support the children, maybe so be it. But as we speak now, the children will run home, their parents are off in the informal sector largely, and the parent has not even got capacity to read the homework and tell the child whether what they did was correct or wrong. So the problem is quite a complex one, and we need to be able to address it from the foundation. We cannot put makeup on it and wish it away. We have to look at the capacity of the entire population vis-a-vis how we structure interventions to support them. As a continent, we believe that we are doing well under the circumstances. But when we hear people openly tell us that we are the sleeping giants or that we are the dark continent, we have to be sure that we may not be doing as well as we think we are doing. And so there is a lot more expected of us, and we have to be up to it. Some of the things based on my experience, and I have worked both at the Ministry of Finance and now at the Ministry of Education. Based on my experience, we have a lot of interventions in education. For instance, we have the student loan where I worked. We have the study leave with pay. We have the scholarships and what have you. These are interventions to create access. Is it possible to repackage them as incentives for people who would deliver skills, who would offer education in the areas where we have a skills gap? It's forever been known that we don't have adequate teachers in science, in maths, And then in engineering, we know those gap areas. The deficiencies have existed from the basic level forever. What can we package our interventions in education into incentives for people to rather do the areas where we have the gaps and then leave the other areas so that the scarce resources can be targeted at our problems? That's something that we have to think about. Again, we know that, I don't think in my head, I've never doubted that the African is not capable of doing it. In fact, we have seen Africans excel when they have been put in the right environment and given the right resources. And so back home, if we are put in the right environment with the right structures in place, I'd like it when Obama looked us in the face and said, don't build strong people, build strong institutions. That it's a simple slogan, but it's deep. What it takes to have strong institutions is at the core of some of the things we talked about, the values. What do I lose if I put it in a strong system? And those are some of the difficult things we have to cross today. A certain generation must make that decision for it to be corrected going forward. But if a generation does not make that decision, it's not going to happen for us. And I'm sorry, we are going to get to a point, and I can foresee this happening, where the fourth industrial revolution technologies can scale up and produce efficiently for the entire world. And maybe they will just put us on an unemployment benefit because we are, as a population, we are not that productive as compared to what their technologies can do. And so we need to start now. There was a research by Pricewaterhouse that has already started giving us some of the things the West are doing to prepare their citizens for effective participation in the fourth industrial revolution. Yes, here. It has admitted that automation is going to hurt, and it's going to hurt most African countries because we are the population that is ill-equipped to participate effectively. And they have said that it is estimated that 30% of jobs will be gone by 2030. That's just 9 years away. The youth population and low-skilled workers are expected to be hardest hit by automation. That is something they have told us. Now, what are the people in the West doing? They are beginning to retrain their people for highly skilled jobs and professions so that they can respond. What are we doing? We are still sitting down and waiting for it to come, and then we will find ourselves lacking. It is true that automatic cars were replaced with manual cars were replaced with automatic cars, and we sat down and it came to meet us. But this is different, especially because of what COVID has done to the borders and to the protection that we enjoy. And so I believe that we need to really take the issue seriously because of the kind of population that we carry. And we need to take it seriously because the population is boiling up. And we need to take it seriously because, I mean, what is an Africa when the value of its population put together cannot compare with any other place? So we need to look at the fundamental issue of the huge population we have and the quality or the value of that population. So importantly, what we have to do, and this is also not rocket science, is to start integrating at the basic level the soft and the digital skills. I know that with some orientation, we can do that. We should not go and buy laptops ahead of developing an implementation strategy. It's a very common thing in Africa, and there's actually a research that says that in Africa, we buy the computers and lock them up without planning for integration. And by the time we are ready, those computers are not ready. So those type of research, when you read it, it's quite disheartening. So yes, it's a simple task of orientation of our present teachers, and the teachers can demonstrate application of infusion of soft and digital skills into their learning methods as projects for promotion, so that everybody, we can assess how well they are doing to incorporate these type of soft skills in the general basic education delivery. We know that that is what artificial intelligence cannot do. Artificial intelligence can do a lot of things, but it can do what people have programmed them to do. So they cannot solve problems. They cannot have empathy, at least for now. they cannot have critical thinking, and that is what we need to start our children, we need to start developing in our children as we go forward. Again, a lot of information is available, and the information tells us the same thing, that in the current industrial revolution, what will be critical would be math, science, technology, and engineering. We are aware, it's not like we don't know. What are we doing to fill these gaps? And these are even the areas where we have a lot of deficiencies from the basic level. There are schools you would go to and they've never seen a math teacher, all the way to when they get to JHS, when they will see a math teacher. So these are real, and we cannot start developing engineering skills at the university when the person has never had good interaction with math and science. So the basic level for me is a strong area to start trying to fix the issues from. Investments in education should increase in the areas that promote quality and the value chain from basic. This is what I've said. We should not look at numbers alone. We should look at the quality. And because for me, if you are measuring a hospital and you measure the hospital by the number of people that pass through the hospital, you may not be doing a good measuring. You have to look at, the hospital is meant to cure people. And so how many people who went to the hospital got well? So our educational system must have quality injected into it so that we measure education not by numbers, but by the quality of the people that are educated in our public schools. So the investment for me in education is very, very important, but more importantly, it's in the quality dynamics that go into the investments. So this population issue, we know we cannot do anything about. We are growing at a rate of 4% or above as Africans. And so there's a lot of scary information. In the next whatever years, Africans will be the largest population on the world. Every other 4 people will be Africans, and these are true. What are we doing as the owners of that population to make them adequately prepared to be relevant and to be included in the stage, in the global stage? So we have to redirect people. There are credible online educational sources. And what we usually do in this country, again, and I was talking to an Indian, and the Indian said, in India, for the skills development area, what they do is they know adequately how much it costs to train for a particular skill. Now the private sector is asked to train the people to a certain quality. If the people pass that quality benchmark, then the government will pay you. So you are paying for results. You are not paying for, you're not just going to put them through your system, they cannot pass the exam, and yet you are being compensated. In that way, you find a lot of effort pushed into quality. I think we need to also start using some of these models, outcome-driven models, to derive benefit from the private sector rather than broad contracts. So this is what the person from ILO was talking about, agri-mechanization in a way that we can feed the globe, like Michael said. And we should not continue to pay lip service to it. We should actually put in the right investment required so that educational institutions can now build the capacity we need, and they would all find space along a very productive agri-value chain. We have the power to decide if we want to reap the dividend of the population or if we want to pay a cost to the population. The cost would be in huge prison costs, huge health costs, huge rehabilitation costs, and we are seeing it across the globe. Anytime there is an arrest, sometimes it's sad, the age is 16, 17. What are some of these people doing in prison? We should not be catching our children and imprisoning them. We should be making sure that they don't fall into that trap in the first place, because they are productively engaged and they have ambition to also participate. So the statistics is already there to show that we are paying a heavy price in social cost in maintaining the habits of our youth rather than in getting them to contribute to building the Africa that we dream of. So they said, you give the person a fish, you feed the person for a day, you empower the person, and you equip the person to participate effectively. I think that we should look at empowering our youth. They are capable like any other person from the basic level or from birth. And so all sectors involved in doing that must be engaged. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Sheila Na Buama is a former executive, chief executive officer of NAPTEX. Can I say that this will pass for a purely academic research paper? That's a very detailed one. And she asks a lot of questions that requires a number of answers. She's provided a number of solutions as well. But the most important bit of it is that you give the fish and you empower the person you're giving the fish to so that the person doesn't come back to you, but will be able to do the fishing him or herself. Before we go to the next presentation, I'll take a quick break just so you're able to breathe. And then we come back into the studio here for the next presentation. Stick and stay with us.
And yesterday are the blocks with which we build, with sand, water, and the all-important material cement. We build cities, houses, factories, roads, bridges. Breaking their backs, the builders build. GASEM, with 50 years of experience, has various grades for various jobs. The GASEM Super Rapid 32.5R is suitable for plastering for the perfect finish and all other jobs. The GASEM Super Strong 42.5R is best suited for block manufacturing. And GASEM Extra 42.5M is the best choice for the biggest construction work. Never believe that one grade of cement can be used for all jobs. Choose GASEM Cement always.
3 cement grades, unique quality. GASEM, the nation builder.
Unlock banking with biometrics. Now you can access the Absa mobile banking app using your fingerprint or facial recognition. Download today. That's Africanacity. That's Absa.
You're welcome back from the break. And as I've always been saying, this is the 2021 edition of Business Roundtable. And it is powered by Ishmael Yamson and Associates. So the program is being brought to you by Ishmael Yamson and Associates. And we here at Metro TV are supporting it very, very well. So I'm sure you've been enjoying the program right from the beginning in the morning, and you are taking quite a number of notes and points. You are putting down your questions as well. It's been a learning curve for me, and I'm sure for you who is watching us from your house or wherever, it is a learning curve for you as well. We'll go straight to our next presenter for the morning, and he is in the person of Mr. Kwamena Asumanin. I'll go into a bit of his background, and this one says, Mr. Kwamena Asumanin is currently the Chief Executive Officer of one of the biggest commercial banks here in Ghana. It is Stanbic Bank Ghana. He was the head of corporate and investment banking units of the bank for 11 years prior to the assumption of his present position. A qualified chartered certified accountant, and an astute banking professional with over 2 decades experience. Kwamena's career spans the globe, having worked in some of the world's most prestigious financial institutions, including the International Finance Corporation, IFC, JP Morgan Chase & Co., and Goldman Sachs & Co. And he has provided strategic and financial advisory services to multinational corporations, governments, and high net worth clients. He has a passion for excellence in all that he does and enjoys mentoring young, spirited professionals. And of course, that is why he agreed to be part of the panel today to mentor, to speak to us, the youth, on how we can shape ourselves and move forward into the future. As Mrs. Charlotte Osei would say, take charge. The current dispensation has failed us. We need to take charge. So Kwamena is here to give us his presentation. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'll call on all of you to join me, even though I have the singular honor to do the welcome. Kindly join me, welcome Kwamena Asmani.
Thank you very much, Kwesi, and good morning to our listeners online and in the studios. It is a great pleasure to be here to talk about something else other than banking. Even though I'm a banker today, I'm going to stay away from banking and talk about the youth. I start by extending a big thanks to Mr. Michael Yamson from Ishmael Yamson and Associates for the opportunity, and also to our sponsors and to the media. So the focal point for my discussion today is on preparing Africa's youth for the future. And I'm going to digress a little bit because I will use my personal story as the talking point rather than just sort of an abstract discussion. And I would hope that in that discussion, we will be able to get some snippets of how I transitioned from being a youth into a provider, some of the lessons that I learned. And hopefully if a young man or a young woman is listening, they might take a thing or two from it. I spent 10 years in the US and I came back in 2010. And as an induction back into the country, my father took me to his hometown. And at first I thought he was parading me just to show that his son had come back. But I realized that he was teaching me a life lesson. So he took me across a cluster of houses that housed his cousins and I guess my cousins. And he shared a few important truths to me. I think the first was that he highlighted how, across the generations of cousins, the cousins that had access to education or to some vocational opportunities had fared well. But I think the other lesson which struck me quite strongly was the fact that for the siblings, so his grandfather and his siblings, his grandmother, his siblings, his parents, his siblings, etc., who had taken it upon themselves to support a member of their family to either pursue education or pursue a vocational calling, they had also done much better than those who didn't have that. It was his way of letting me understand that, the system that we have in Africa requires us not only to depend on the formal support systems, but also the personal support systems where I myself should always look for opportunities to support others. But as I was going back home with him, and I reflected on our conversation, I realized that our youth could be categorized into 3 buckets. So the first bucket comprises those deprived who have sort of challenging financial circumstances. And a lot of the speakers before me have discussed the role of poverty. In fact, I believe that 95% of our problems in Africa is poverty driven. But you do have those youth who are not academically capable, but they're gifted with their hands. And at the beginning, I did talk about the 3 H's, the head, the heart, and the hand as a holistic approach to youth development. The second comprises those who can pursue academic heights, but after completing basic education, they have to stop because they can't go further either into university or into a vocational setting. And then the third is for people who go all the way through to university. But after coming out of university, they realize that, the world has evolved and they have to evolve with the world. My personal story as a youth took place in the third bucket. I grew up on a university campus. My dad is a university professor. So education was not a negotiable topic. Even up till today, my dad asks me when I'm doing my PhD. But I think what was important for my experience was the fact that both parents had a science, technology, education, and mathematics background, STEM. And I believe Sheila spoke about it quite strongly. And so it was almost a given that all of us would, myself and my two siblings, would study STEM subjects up to the A level. So I studied physics, chemistry, and mathematics all the way to the A level. I thought I wanted to be an engineer, but I saw the world evolving around me, and finance was a lot more topical. It was a lot more interesting at the time. And so I evolved into finance. But I would say that while my experience was in the third bucket, for the majority of youth, they find themselves in the first and the second bucket. And that's where, my focus on poverty would be today. There's some statistics from the World Bank that shows that as a country, our rate of poverty reduction is actually declining. So if we believe that poverty is the bane of our youth, then we have big issues to confront as the rate of poverty declines over the last decade. It's gone down from 2% in 1991 to 98 to 0.2% in 98 to 2005, and so on and so forth. And look, we can point to some of the interventions that have been done, free compulsory basic education, and then the free SHS. But the lack of infrastructure just goes back to point out how much poverty is holding us back. So my sense going forward in terms of how we envision Africa's future is that, notwithstanding the challenges, we need to make STEM education the foundation. If we look at the world around us, you'd notice that a lot of the big companies now, whether it's Amazon or Apple or Google, the leaders have one thing in common: they're engineers. I think Sheila also spoke about, what the STEM education does in teaching people to use mathematical and scientific approaches to solving problems. We've spoken about education, and I know there'll be questions about financing for education. But as a banker, agriculture sector. But as a banker, as I think about the agriculture sector, the biggest source of risk is the variability between the plan and then the outcome. And science and technology can be used to address that through irrigation and genetic selection of crops, and so on and so forth. And so I'm a big believer in STEM. And I believe Sheila spoke about it quite extensively. So I wouldn't dwell on that point too much. But the point about STEM is not to play down other social sciences or other forms of education. But if you speak to a few of the university professors, they will tell you that a lot of the students come into university and they realize that not having done some foundational STEM courses, it becomes difficult for them to pursue their career choices in the university because they're missing some foundational blocks. So I believe the first foundational block that we have to embrace as a country is STEM. The second is learning by doing. And Sheila stole my favorite statement: give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. But I think that as leaders, we need to place a much greater emphasis on vocational learning and disabuse the minds of our youth that the university title and university route is an assured path for achieving career success. The country has always known the importance of vocational education, and we have 10 vocational institutions scattered all over the country, one in each capital. And interestingly enough, they're named after the regional capitals. So you have Ho Poly. If you didn't know the capitals of Accra, you could just look at the names, the capitals of the Ghana regions, with 10 till it moved to 16. But we had Ho Poly and then Accra Poly, Takoradi Poly, and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at the number of polytechnics and the number of universities and how these have evolved over the years, there's some lessons there. In 1990, we had 3 universities. In 2014, we had 70. I believe that the number has gone up. But if you look at the number of polytechnics, which have now, some of them have evolved into technical universities, it still stayed at 10. So my question is, and I don't know how many of you use the services of a plumber, but one of the most difficult professionals to find in Accra or Ghana is qualified plumber. Is there a link between the difficulty of finding competent plumbers and the fact that we haven't expanded our institutions for polytechnics and vocational learning? And that's a question that we would have to discuss. But I would also like to commend the Commission for Technical and Vocational Education for their annual skills competition. I think that has started paying a lot more attention to, the use, the need for the youth to have the ability to use their hands to solve real problems. I've heard about the Robotics Academy, where the youth are learning, the foundations of robotics just to, learn a trick or two about automation. And these are all interventions that are quite useful. Just to highlight how important apprenticeship is as a means of embedding vocational learning, we can look to the US and the UK, and they have a National Apprenticeship Week. And this is a week where business leaders, career seekers, and other critical partners, come together to provide apprenticeship sponsors with opportunities to showcase their programs and facilities. And I think that in Ghana, if we should have an apprenticeship week where, corporate Ghana can come, and then the educational institutions, to make apprenticeship attractive as another path and not just university education. The third pillar speaks to the establishment of incubators, accelerators, and labs to foster innovation. And again, it sort of expands the learning by doing pillar. Experience, as we all know, is the best teacher. A popular story is told of the inventor, Thomas Edison, while he was working on creating the light bulb in his laboratory in New Jersey. A visitor came by and expressed sympathy to Edison regarding the various failed experiments and the lack of results. Edison countered by saying that I have failed. I have not failed, not once. I have discovered 10,000 ways that don't work. It sort of vividly illustrates why our talented youth need support to experiment, to brainstorm, and to co-create. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the lack of financing as a hindrance, but I believe that ability to learn by doing is an important pillar that we need to discuss. Finally, I'll just talk about what Stanbic has done to help the youth to realize their dreams. In 2019, in August 2019, we launched the Stanbic Bank Incubator. It's a community. Think of it as a community that provides business advisory, coaching, mentorship, and market facilitation access to entrepreneurs and startups. And it also provides an opportunity for bank staff to mentor up-and-coming youth and entrepreneurs. I think that this is one example of how we can, support, corporate Ghana can support apprenticeship and learning by doing within the youth space. So I'd like to conclude at this point, happy to take some questions afterwards. But I'll say that the importance of the youth in Africa cannot be overemphasized. In Ghana, our youth represents 35% of our population, and that's essentially our talent pipeline. And the goal, the responsibility for ensuring that the youth contributes effectively to our nation building process is a collective one. It's not just for our leaders. It lies with policymakers, with the educational and corporate institutions, with parents. I think Abna, my namesake, spoke about the role of parents in equipping the hearts. That's the third H. So the head, the heart, and the hand. Parents, and then the youth themselves, in terms of the choices they make. My hope is that through these conversations, we can devise workable solutions to increase the focus and investments in vocational and technical training, and then we can shift policy and financial support towards effective career counseling and entrepreneurship, mentorship, and then subject choices at school to give you that foundational block that makes you very adaptable. So thank you very much for that. I'll stop here.
Right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's Kwamena Asubenin, the Chief Executive Officer of Stanbic Bank Ghana. I remember a few days ago when I was doing an introduction, I had to add that that's the bank, my bank, where I bank as a person, and they are not doing a bad job at all. When we get to the other banks, we'll do an introduction of them at all. My personal experience with those other banks. I see somebody panicking and putting their hand on their chest, but I mean, they are doing a very good job. And when we get there, we'll be talking about them. But that's a very important presentation coming from somebody in the banking or financial sector. We'll take a quick break. There are a number of points I have put down. We'll come back into our final presentation for the day, and then we can get on to our questions and answers. I understand that there are quite a number of people also on Zoom who are ready with their questions. I hope that this time around, we'll be able to pick your questions directly from you, or we still print them out and read them for you. So stay with us.
Introducing the Enterprise app by the Enterprise Group. Access products and services of all our subsidiaries at your own convenience on your smartphone, tablet, or PC. The app allows you to automatically calculate your premium, view your policy status, renew your policy, submit a service request, register a claim, and check a claim status. Make online payments via mobile money or debit card, and enjoy so many other useful features. Download the app today by tapping the Play Store or the App Store icon on your smartphone and searching for Enterprise Advantage app. Select the app and install on your phone. Also scan this QR code right now to download the app, or visit my.enterprisegroup.net.gh on your PC to use it on the web.
Enterprise, your advantage.
Right, so you're welcome back from that break, and we are still in session. I'll go straight to my final presenter for the day, and she's also from the financial sector, of course, led a very major transformation agenda of the bank she works for. A very big transition. I'll do that introduction. And it says she is the managing director of Absa Bank Ghana. I'm sure you've been following her for quite a time now, since the transition from the very well-known Barclays Bank into Absa Bank. And this one says, popularly known as Barclays Bank Ghana, Abena has over 25 years in-depth Pan-African experience and is credited with driving a positive transformation, having successfully led the Barclays transition from a 100-year-old brand and household name into a new brand, Absa. Her passion for colleague empowerment and excellent client experience has enabled the bank become the most profitable bank in Ghana, even during the transition. And I see her nodding her head on this one. She also has broad board executive council and other leadership experience, and is an honorary member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers and an honorary, again, member of or fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Abena Osei-Puku is the Chief Executive Officer of Absa Bank. Oh, please help me acknowledge her. To the floor, sir.
Am I on now?
Yes, you're on.
Excellent. So thank you, Akwesi, and to my fellow speakers. It's been very engaging and exciting, and I'm personally privileged and thrilled actually to be here. Talking about the youth is one that is deeply meaningful to me personally for so many reasons, but I'll leave that for the Q&A. So let me start by putting a few key points on the table. I know we've heard a lot already, so come on a journey with me. Let's imagine it's 2050, and these are the headlines that we're seeing on our beloved continent. So Africa's population by 2050 will be 3.6 billion, 3 times what it is today. There's so much activity, and if you think that our roads are congested today, you can imagine what lies ahead. Some of you might be thinking we're in 2021. Why is she thinking of 2050? But 30 years is not a long time, from here. Let me put that into perspective. It takes about 18 years under the current education system to get somebody, from the infancy stage through high school level. Takes about 21 years to degree level, and to be a professional between 25 and 30. Of course, if you're Shabre, that could take you maybe 22, but on average, that's what it takes. So if we want to see changes in the next generation, we have to start now. A lot has been said already, but 1 out of 4 of all the world's youth would actually be amongst the 3.6 billion I spoke about. Some may think this is an issue, but for me, it's not. I see it as an opportunity, because an educated, energized youth is actually a very significant strategic asset. And we as in Africa, will have the largest of such a population, and it all depends on what we do with that population. So moving on right away, a lot has been said already, and some might be saying Africa is already doing a lot. But if you look at the growth over the past decades, it has actually been driven mainly by increases in commodity prices, driven mainly by demand either from China or most of the very rapid industrialized nations. And it's not from value addition or technology or active manufacturing or production. And I think a lot of our speakers or my colleagues have already spoken about that. So consider that many of the productive youth today leave the continent, usually, either after secondary or tertiary education, and they try and, look for greener pastures in other lands. And if you have been following history, or even recently, as Sheila mentioned, the NSAS campaign that happened in Nigeria, you can see that it's very easy, for the youth to be destabilized, and therefore destabilize the nations where they are. And if you look at this very carefully, and the fact that Africa also has the largest mobile communication penetration, you can imagine what can happen if we don't do something proactively about the youth. So I just want to proffer 5 quick ideas that I think we can think about, and the first for me is about implementing what I would call a systems leadership initiative. And I think a lot of my colleagues have already mentioned this. This should actually start from the beginning. So this is my first point, point number one. Okay. And it's a systems leadership initiative. And this is about stakeholders coming together collaboratively, to discuss issues of national importance. What typically happens is if it's government will have their own discussion. If it's private sector, you have your own discussion. The communities have their own discussion, and the youth. And as I said, even before I was introduced, one of the things we missed out ourselves is we should have had maybe a couple of youth under the first definition up to 24 years, sitting around the table so we can actually hear their viewpoints on this. And system leadership in itself, because you're listening to different viewpoints, and also it's very inclusive, you get more buy-in, or you get better buy-in. And that's what we need, across the continent to be able to solve some of these, big challenges that have already been spoken of. So there are 5 sort of sub things I want to talk about under the systems leadership. One is around the 2 C's. There's the need to convene and also to commit, and this is just talking about there should be multiple stakeholder engagement. And as I said earlier, would have been nice to engage millennials and Gen Zs. And actually for my presentation, what I did was to just get about 7 of them together and tell them, that this was what I was going to talk about and what would they want me to present. So I'm actually standing here presenting on their behalf. Absolutely. So youth representative for the day. So that's what I did. The second one also around this was to look and learn. Typically when you go into a meeting, different people are coming with different backgrounds, different experiences, and we need to be able to create, the environment where we listen even to different viewpoints, and this is necessary because you don't have to imagine that only your viewpoint is the right one. You should be open to new information. I mean, having been here for just a couple of hours, I've learned a lot personally, and there are things I'm going to do differently. Even though I came here to speak, I've also learned, and that's what I expect that all of us will do going forward. And whenever you have this kind of forum, you have to also, as the leader of that forum, be able to lead and also engage the team so that you nurture some relationships. You cannot be discussing important topics and the people are not comfortable with one another. So if you're going to have a systems leadership, there's a need to engage and also to energize. And then you have to be accountable. Stakeholders must demonstrate results. I think one of my colleagues or panelists spoke about, buying the laptops before we figure out what we're going to do with them. That is a no-no. We should be accountable both at individual and also as a collective in our various countries and also in the nation. And then finally is to review and revise. It's an ever-evolving process. So you have a meeting, you discuss the ideas with the inclusive stakeholders. And when you're done, next time, you apply those learnings to strengthen the approach so you have a better outcome subsequently. So in summary, my first point is system leadership. And what it really does is it eliminates the concept of silo problem solving, and it actually embraces a more collaborative problem solving technique through collective leadership. And I recommend highly that governments and leaders in African countries, we must implement these initiatives, not just when you're working, but starting from schools, the workplace, the community, so that together, we can harness a very collaborative problem-solving mentality for the African youth, especially in their formative years. And I think a number of my panelists have said the same thing. The second idea I wanted to share is about stimulating youth entrepreneurship. For me, this is fundamental. We must match the growth in numbers, capacity and capability, with productive businesses. And as much as jobs are important, I think even more important is empowering the energized youth I referred to earlier, so that they'll be able to bring their ideas together to solve real problems that we are facing today, so they can create wealth here in the continent for future generations. Some of the other benefits of large-scale entrepreneurship, as we all know, is to bring the youth that are already alienated or marginalized back into the economic mainstream. and that is really critical. The second is there are a number of youth also going through either mental or, social psychological problems and delinquency. And if we pull them in, it would give them an opportunity to also start innovating and becoming productive so that with a collective mind power is used to positively impact our society. I mean, I think it was last week or the week before, I was reading BBC and I came across a very interesting article, and it's called How a Nigerian Scheme Forged in War Creates Billionaires. And it showcases how a Nigerian entrepreneurship scheme, and I think it's pronounced Igba Boy, and if you're Nigerian, forgive my accent here, it actually gives youth a front row seat in practical experience by understudying a well-entrenched entrepreneur like a Dangote or let's say an NS chemist in Ghana. So I think one of you spoke about apprenticeship, and this is the practical way of getting that done. So it's not just meeting for a short period, but that person stays with them, they learn from them. And then at the end of that training program, it could be a year, it could be 2, it could be 3, instead of being paid, the person, the Oga in this case, sets you up. So the apprentice leaves with, let's say if you did this with an NS chemist, you finish and he sets up a small pharmacy for you. So it's not just you learned the skills, but you actually are going straight to applying it. And you can also now start multiplying that effect. I understand this has been so successful that Strive Masiyiwa, the Zimbabwean billionaire who has just been named, I think it was just on Sunday, as Britain's first Black billionaire, actually has also used this in his company. And since he's a billionaire, I think it's something we should all listen to and try and multiply in our various countries. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I also heard the Director General of African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, actually proposing the establishment of what he called youth entrepreneurship investment banks in every African country so that they could support young entrepreneurs. I'm sure you'll be thinking, why wouldn't the banks just do that? But that's a different conversation. And in Ghana, the setup of the Development Bank of Ghana, would actually allow the private sector and of course the youth to be able to gain access to not just short-term capital, which they have today, but to the medium and long-term capital at affordable rates through their banks. So I think that initiative from the government would also help us a lot. So let me just move quickly to my third one. And I think almost every panelist has spoken about that. For me, my third idea was about specific or rather interventions in specific sectors of the economy. And I just chose 2, agriculture, which I'm sure all of us appear to love, and technology. Structurally, we know that the world will have to find more innovative ways of feeding itself. I actually like how you positioned it around, the song Feed the World, and 40 years down, we haven't arrived, but the reality is Africa still has the largest arable land, about 60% in this world. And this is a significant strategic advantage, which we must use to promote economies of scale so that we can actually leverage this, vital asset and obtain a competitive advantage, across our continent. And I think agric is important in almost every nation. We have to change the perceptions and get the next generation to see agriculture as the next cash cow, not least because I have family members, including my husband, who is a farmer. But also in 2018, I think there was a youth employment summit in agriculture in Kigali, and a young lady stood up and challenged how agriculture is being promoted and advocated to attract the youth, and she said, and I'm going to use her words for part of it, she said, agriculture must be advertised as a sexy occupation. I see that my team wrote attractive, because sexy probably didn't sound right professionally, exactly, and what she was saying is that currently, if you go online, and I think for our viewers, after this, you can check. If you either Google or do a search on agriculture or Ministry of Agriculture in your nation, you're not going to find young people, energetic people that are like, oh, I want to be like this person. I mean, when I did the search myself, I saw a lot of the people, I mean, with no disrespect, looked more elderly, whether you're going on pension and you're looking for something to do thereafter. but it's actually something that can dramatically change, the economic fate of our nations. And so it should be promoted. And she went on to say that stakeholders should literally promote agriculture as the oxygen, of African economies, and not just the backbone. Because without the backbone, you can live. Without oxygen, we've all seen how COVID has made oxygen so important. Without oxygen, you cannot live. And so that is what I'd like us to see. And then I think my just second point around this is that the governments across our nations also must ensure that there are modern policies, policies that embrace modern farming practices. I think that has been discussed severally. Basic things that making sure that if the youth are now going into agriculture, as an example, there's land title, sorted out, logistics is not a problem, and they can also add value to the produce. And this is where the second point I spoke about on the entrepreneurship comes in. We have to be able to create a culture to support these entrepreneurs, so that Africa will now be a place where there are uncountable number of successful entrepreneurs. I don't know how many people online know Niche Cocoa, a very successful, manufacturer or processor in the cocoa industry, and we need to multiply these. So a second point around here is technology and digitization. I think that has also been spoken about severally, but I need to make the point that we all know that on the continent, Kenya is praised for, its tech entrepreneurs, and perhaps some of us should also adopt, if not all of us, their best practice. But the continent needs to be a future hub of global growth, not just pockets of, hubs and growth of techpreneurs, because we understand fully that technology and digital solutions do not only create convenience, but it also enhances the customer experience, regardless of the industry one is in. So when we are trying to name success stories in Africa on technology, we should have an unending list, and not just the two that I have here, who are Sasha and Tunde, who are the founders of Jumia, which I'm sure everybody listening online or is mindful of. And over the last 50 years, I think Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, as we know, we are the first and second in cocoa. But recently, I think we've all seen the news where China has just used technology to increase, the production and productivity of cocoa. So we have to be able to transition from just doing things manually to adopting the right technology so that we can see an expansion, and multiplication and exponential growth in what we do. My fourth point, I think, has also been spoken about a lot, and it's about education and the future skills of work. And I think Kwamina did an excellent job of simplifying that. It's often a very emotive area. And I just remembered when in my previous job, your dad actually once wrote, he was chairman, and he wrote an article in the papers, and he said that he isn't sure, or rather, based on his the interviews he had conducted in recent years, a lot of the people that were coming out of our universities, were not ready for work. I don't know if you remember that article. It was in the media forever, So it's often an emotive area because we can all relate to it, and it's pivotal, for us to be able to grow, or rather improve, Africa. The current system of education, I think that has been spoken about a lot, where children enter primary school, you have to go to secondary school, tertiary, if you are lucky or blessed. I think it's outdated, honestly. It's not for everybody. And it doesn't pass down the practical experience so many of our more mature population have, or what is required for the world of work. Recently I came across the Khan Academy as an example. It's an online platform where you can learn anything, from art to zoology, and anything in between. Imagine that we had this kind of tool, not in English, but in our local, modified for language and for context, and imagine that the telecos would also be so kind to grant everybody in, one of the public schools, whether it's Jamestown Primary or wherever, access to download, information at night. so that even if you are not in a formal institution where you are learning how to think critically or solve problems, you have the opportunity, to do this on your own. Consider an exam that actually meant instead of repeating something you learned in class, and you just have to be able to, put it in memory and then bring it out. Imagine that the exam was now to solve a set of everyday problems. I think the focus here is on applied ideas and approaches so that education will have a real impact, and when people have to transition from the world of school to the world of work, it will be very easy. So for me, workplace skills, I think, should not be overlooked, when educating our young. This is the how of the workplace. That is why sometimes you find somebody who had a first-class degree, who has applied to over 100 institutions and has been fortunate to get 2 interviews and didn't get the job. And then you have somebody else who had the 3rd class, who applied to 2, and then they get the job. And you're thinking, I've not got the job. I mean, she wasn't exactly great at school, because there are a whole set of skills that the other first-class candidate did not have. So our current educational structures, I propose, should emphasize this aspect of learning, and it shouldn't be too late in the cycle. I think it should be very early, right from infancy. And I think a number of my colleagues have already mentioned that. And so to complete all of this, I have my 5th and final point. And I think Charlotte did a great job of that. And it's about putting in place, appropriate policy, administering it well, and also having a regulatory framework, to support that. And I don't want to overplay this because there's so much that has already been said, but currently you can see that it takes weeks, months, sometimes years to set up a business, to register a business, and then you can see that sometimes you have entrepreneurs who, because they probably do not understand the whole idea of taxation, would sometimes try and not reflect, things as they ought to be. And this is where I think we need support. So first, we need to be able to streamline the business registration processes, procedures, and also to lower the costs. Imagine, Abna is 22, trying to start up a business. I can't pay so much to do that. So we have to register, we have to lower the costs, especially for the youth. And then secondly, we have to support by providing information and obviously counseling, and then assistance to regulatory issues. I think we shouldn't assume that once you read stuff, you understand. Because even as chief executive, when I read things, sometimes I call people to explain to me, so the youth need that support. And then we must provide supportive taxation regulations. And of course, taxation rates that are simpler, and so they can also be instrumental in this process. And finally, for me, is to ensure the rule of law. This particular idea for me operates pretty much like education, because it's a multiplier to all the other ones that I spoke about. And these are really helpful to get ourselves as individuals, as communities, as nations, as a continent, to address the challenge coming in the next generation. So in closing, let me offer a word of hope and reflection. For me, it is in addressing our biggest challenges that we forge the bonds, solve the problems, and chart the journey to a shared future together. When I think about our youth, the millions of minds today who are solving everyday challenges just to stay alive, not to thrive, they should be rather thinking of how to progress and tap into the wealth, that we see in our nations. There is actually no doubt at all that Africa is rising. We have the chance to make sure it rises to be something that all of us can be proud of for the generations to come. We might have failed them, but I think the good thing is talking about it is a start. What is required is action. And collectively, not just us, but in the next forum, there'll be younger people as well. And together we can deliberate on these issues. And hopefully, as some of the panelists have said already, it doesn't end with a talk. we actually would expect that Ishmael Yamson and Associates would actually take some of these ideas, share it with, the right bodies in the various governments, and then we can move this forward. So thank you so much for your time. And I hope I've given you something to think about and inspired you yourself to deliver a message of hope, not a message of everything is broken in Africa, because especially if we come together collectively, we will be amazed at the Africa we'll be seeing over the next decade. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Abina is the Chief Executive Officer of Absa Bank. And I've already told you she's led the transition from Barclays Bank previously, now to Absa Bank. And I hope that I'm going to open an account there because it's an African bank now. That's the case. Previously, I would think that it's a bank from England. And so when I put in my money, it would look very small, the cedis against the pound. But now cedi against cedi or CFA or other currencies. So yes, I think I'm allowed to open an account at any branch in Absa. They're also doing very well. Please, another round of applause for. Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. And so the questions will start flowing almost immediately. But I have Mame here also on the line. And I told you earlier on that she's going to give us a brief commentary on all the things that we have said here before we begin our question and answers. After her, we'll take a quick break and come back into the questions. We are very much marking the time and want to be on schedule. So, Mame, if you are ready, let's listen to you now. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you've been following and monitoring the discussions. Let's hear you.
Thank you very much, and happy belated Africa Day. Thank you very much to Ishmael Yamson and Associates for this amazing opportunity to share my remarks. My name is Mame Dehir, and I am a policy analyst with the Government of Canada, specifically with the Public Health Agency of Canada. And I am also a founder of a not-for-profit organization called the Power of Love Foundation Canada. Now, today I'll be sharing a few remarks on the influence of education, policy reforms, and the need to implement grassroots initiatives. The renowned speakers have superbly summarized some of the austere gaps within the continent of Africa. Notwithstanding, I will share my transient remarks on the place of education as described by Madam Sheila. Indubitably, education plays a significant and influential role in our society. And in the field of public health, education is considered as a social determinant of health. And this goes to imply that if an individual or population receives quality education, especially at the local or basic level, like Madam Sheila emphasized, this will unequivocally and positively impact their overall health outcome, especially on an individual and population level. Now, evidence-based research demonstrates that there is a lack of diversity in the field of STEM, especially when it comes to Blacks and Africans occupying positions in the STEM field. Subsequently, this shows that there's a prevalent gap within this industry. Therefore, it is expedient for students at the basic level to receive training in this field, which will be salutary to their overall development, especially as youth. In recent times, the phrase STEM has been sort of rebranded into STEAM, or with the inclusion of an extra A and another M, whereby the A signifies arts and the M signifies medicine. Hence, there are other ways and means that the creation of or enforcing and developing people in the field of STEM could be utilized. One could be with the use of youth-focused initiatives, such as mentorship programs and so on. And I was very excited to hear that Mr. Kwame Asimeni had mentioned that Stantic Bank was actually using an intervention, which was a Stantic Bank intervention that was tailored to mentor youth towards nation building. Now, in terms of policy reforms, being a policy analyst myself, I do acknowledge that when implementing and making amendments to policies, it could be very strenuous and it's not as easy as it's portrayed. However, if government leaders, policymakers, state-sanctioned institutions, and organizations are able to reform and create effective long-term policies and programs that are youth-tailored and youth-focused, this indeed can contribute to overall development. Therefore, I want to conclude by saying that as a global village, we are all striving towards the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, and within these goals, in the goal number 7, it's aiming towards strong and quality education, which is to ensure inclusivity and quality education that would in turn promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Therefore, it is effective to incorporate STEM or STEAM, and it has been rebranded, into our basic education, and also to enforce effective policies and ensure that there is a policy reforming either in state-sanctioned institutions or organizations. I would like to conclude with a phrase from South Africa, which is a very popular South African phrase, which is Ubuntu. I am because we are. We can all contribute to the development of Africa in our little ways. And I believe that this will make the African continent a better place. Africa depends on us. Africa depends on you and I. Thank you once again to Ishmael Yamson and Associate for this amazing opportunity to share my remarks. My name is Mame Dahir. Over to you.
Right, so thank you very much. Of course, we can appreciate Mame for that brief, but of course, very detailed presentation as well, or commentary on all of the things that we have said here so far. And so if you have your question, kindly prepare yourself that after this very quick break, you'll give it to us. We will not be able to pick too many questions. So if you can type it as well, kindly do us the honors so that we are able to put all of them together. Even when we have left here, we will still forward the questions to our panel members because from here we continue the discussion and we continue to follow through on how we can get the youth to take charge of tomorrow. This is Business Roundtable 2021. We'll be right back.
Anywhere you dance, I'm big dead out.
Akusia, I'm awful. I have to go deposit some money at the bank and buy some things at the mall.
Okay, but deposit money at this time? Which bank is still open?
Oh, Akusia. With a Stanbic ATM, even without your debit card, you can deposit money at the ATM. And you know the ATM doesn't close. It is 24/7.
Oh, wow. That's good, oh. You know, as for me, when I close late, I have to carry the money on me home with all the risks. And sometimes even when I'm asleep and I hear mosquitoes making noise in my ears, I have to wake up and check if the money is still there.
Oh, Akusia, don't make me laugh.
I'm serious, Daddy. It's not easy for me at all.
Me cable.
Hey, Beje no kobi view.
I'm off to the mall now.
Enterprise, your advantage.
You're welcome back. So we are still live on Metro TV and on DSTV channel 277. We are live on our Facebook page, Ishmael Yamson and Associates. So you can get on there and put up your questions if you've been monitoring. And then we are live on Zoom and on YouTube as well. I understand also that we are live on Original TV. I'm currently hearing that live on Original TV. So you can tune in to Original TV as well. And so I'll now come back into the studio, but instead of asking my very own questions, we don't have a lot of time now. I'll go straight to Zoom to listen to the questions and the contributions. As I'm told, we have people standing by there to give us questions there. And then if we have maybe 1 or 2 minutes, we will put up our own to them. So can we have the very first person kindly mention your name, where you are watching us from, because we know there are other people watching us outside Ghana and even Africa, and then put up your question. Right, so whilst we prepare for people who are standing by on Zoom, we have quite a number of questions that have come in from those who have typed theirs. We'll try as much as possible to read some of them, but I will begin with the two bankers, and when we can come to NAPTEX, former chief executive of NAPTEX. You spoke about the development bank, which is a good initiative. The things that they are supposed to do. He spoke about vocational training and the fact that we need to invest more in that sector, and then in agric as well. Why are we not doing that yet? And I'll come and put the same question to you.
Thank you, Akwesi. I think to say we are not doing it at all will not be accurate, but we are not doing it, at the scale that is required. So a number of banks, including Absa, we have a startup proposition, and we also have an emerge proposition. The startup is to help youngsters who are entrepreneurs to be able to, have their businesses up and running. In addition to the expectations from a bank, we also give them technical support, mentoring, etc. But we are not doing enough. And I think
on the large scale.
On the large scale, you see, because this, if you look at all the statistics that have been shared, this needs to be something that is exponential. And so that is why I think getting, as an example in Ghana, the development bank coming on board, where the interest would actually, or the cost of financing, will not only be cheaper, but will be for a longer period of time. Most banks, currently lend for up to about 5 years. And that is not enough for somebody who's starting up a business. So we are doing it, but we need to do it in a much larger scale. And I think that is why the conversation is relevant.
So let me come to you with the same question coming up. You mentioned some of the things that you're doing, but you agree, for example, a plumber, if well-structured, if well-trained, if everything done, probably supported with technology. Why are we not doing that to that scale yet?
So thank you very much. I think in my comments, I did highlight the fact that, corporate Ghana should embrace apprenticeships as a form of corporate social responsibility. Thus far, most of the handouts have been monetary, financial. And it is my expectation that as entrepreneurship becomes more entrenched, within our economy, we will begin to have corporations, involve themselves in sponsoring some of these technical institutions to develop skills. I think the development bank addresses a gap that is one of many gaps within our economy. We're all well aware that the absence of patient capital is one of the biggest foundational gaps that we have in our startup space. Oftentimes, people wrongly think that banks should be financing startups. I make the point that we need to move to a construct where, rather than a solo person going to a bank and trying to raise a loan, you pull together resources, cooperatives with friends.
Charlotte mentioned that as well.
Yes, friends, family members coming together, and then gaining a critical mass of foundational equity, and then you approach the bank for working capital. I think it's a bit of a very strong leap. If you read stories of successful entrepreneurs, both, and I use the word successful, both in Ghana and elsewhere, other parts of Africa, they will all have stories of how they either borrowed money from a family member or they, sort of got a grant from a benefactor. I think that the bank comes into play further down the line when you have, a proposition that is quote unquote bankable. But at the very early stages, it's owner's risk. It's not bank risk. the funds we have are depositors' funds. So we can't, risk them unduly. And so, I think we've got to move from a construct where we like to go solo in Africa, rather than pooling, like-minded entrepreneurs together, we like to go solo. And the shift that is required is that, find some classmates, find some family members, involve your parents, and then grow the business to a point before you go in. But just to highlight the last point on the development bank, it does address the patient capital, but there are other interventions that are required from a venture capital perspective. That's a lot more speculative in terms of its approach. And so I believe that the development bank would be a first step to many other interventions that will be coming through.
Charlotte, you had wanted to add something, or you're okay? You're okay. But on that point, do we not need a national policy, an effective national policy? We have the National Youth Authority, and I want to ask you that particular question based on what the two of them have said. We have the National Youth Authority, we have the Youth Employment Agency, we have NEIP, but we need a conscious program, a conscious effort to make sure that right from the beginning of education, as we have all stated, the STEM through to the point where they get jobs and the point where we have skills empowerment and training and all that, then people are empowered. Do we not need a national strategic policy? There is a development bank coming up, as we have talked about, but what should be the case?
Let me look at it from the African perspective,
Right.
Because again, we have audience that are not necessarily from Ghana. And I would want to say that the issue of structure of our economies and education, they go hand in hand. Now, if we fix education, assuming we're able to fix education, and we don't fix the structure, there will be no space for them to participate. And that in itself will be another problem. So we need to be looking at the two sides together. And many a times we forget the structural issues, which are fundamental to opening up space for participation for everybody. And currently, the reason why many people would finish school and cannot find jobs, and that when you put out an advert for 5 people, you get 10,000 people, is because the education is producing at a faster pace than the economy can absorb. So again, I would want to say we should look at that. Issues about the various interventions that exist, are they sustainable? Another thing as Africans, we should have to be looking at when we agree on how we'll solve a problem is the cost. Now, interventions that solve the issue in the medium term are great because it takes pressure off the system. But whilst they are at it, we need to be using the credible online platforms to scale them up in certain areas that they can be effective and they can participate anywhere they go. So you don't want to see our graduates being drowned in Spain. And every day is something we hear on BBC because they can't find jobs. And it's, some of these things, when you don't witness them because we are quite comfortable in our luxuries, you don't know how depressing it is. Yesterday, I met somebody and after a few minutes, the person calls me, "Oh, madam, how are you?" And I'm like, "I'm good. Can you help me go abroad?" And I'm like, "Why?" So I said, "There's COVID and people are actually staying at home." He says, "No, I want to go. If I don't go, I'll die of hunger. I would rather go and die from COVID than to stay." So that is the mindset of people who have finished school and have certificates, but cannot find space. The banks are full. They are not automation. They are automating. The airports have automated where it would have taken many more people. Now, one machine would do the work of 100. So yes, there are structural issues we have to pay attention to. And these interventions that you spoke about, youth employment, NACO, are great, but they are great in a very limited way. And the cost of it is such that we need to inject a bit more reskilling or retooling into the people to make it a sustainable solution going forward. Can I add a bit on the work integration? And I like that bit because of where I'm coming from, where the polytechnics are expected to work, integrate, and train. But you see, if you look at the structure again, we don't have a very vibrant manufacturing sector. In fact, the place that is big is the informal sector. And when you take people to the watch seller for work experience, work integration, with a graduate experience, they will not go because in their mind, they have to go to Unilever How many Unilevers do we have? So as we shape people's perception of what work integration should be, we need to be mindful of our context and encourage them to take the experience from the watcher seller with your education so that they can automate or add certain innovative solutions that are quite convenient to the growing middle class. So that is why we need education that incorporates critical thinking and problem solving and not regurgitation, so people can solve the problems within our context.
The capacity training. You have a point to make. Yes, that's the point you made earlier.
I was actually going to make a point on capacity, and I totally endorse the views of Sheila, but I think it's also, we're beginning to treat Africa like one country. The same challenge we have faced as Africans. We have to also appreciate that the different countries of Africa are different stages of development, and so their needs are different. And so if, for instance, the needs of the youth in Ghana in terms of skill may not be the same as Liberia, because post-conflict, because of their history, their challenges may be quite different. And so the interventions that are structured should also be research-based. We see a lot of interventions in Africa, and like you're saying, it doesn't address the structure. We don't look at the sustainability, but it also needs to be research-based. We are taking decisions that I'm not always sure are actually based on research. And then we get surprised when these interventions don't work. There's research, and the African Capacity Building Foundation has done some fantastic work. It's actually on their website. The last one I read was on African critical technical skills. And they actually do an analysis, country by country, what the skills gap is. So if you take Ghana, for instance, how many quantity surveyors do we have in Africa? How many quantity surveyors should we have now? And how many quantity surveyors are we going to need in the next, let's say, 20 years? And they do this for a lot of the African countries, and they look at all these different skills that Africa actually needs. And they also look at the skills that Africa has in the diaspora and how we can harness all those capacities to help in developing Africa. So if you're structuring a curriculum in a university and you don't take this into account, you would end up producing graduates that cannot find jobs. Not because we don't have jobs, we do have jobs.
Right.
There's needs, but what we're producing, there's a mismatch between what we're producing and what the market requires. So we really need to take a step back and be a bit more, use research more, even in designing these interventions we're coming up with in Africa.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Charlotte Osei. Unfortunately, our time is up. We scheduled ourselves to close at 1. And so we've been able to go through all we had wanted to. Unfortunately, the comments from Zoom were not able to pick all, but we have quite a number of them. And let me assure you that we have noted all of them. We are going to share it around to our panelists to take it along. And of course, we'll create a platform as well where we will be able to answer every question that has come. I would give 30 seconds for closing remarks to Michael, 30 seconds, and then we can wrap up.
Well, let me just say thank you very much to all the speakers. Let me say thank you once again to the many hundreds who joined us on Zoom, on YouTube, and Facebook, where without you, it would not have been the success that we have seen today. The points that have been raised are very important. And as the colleagues have said, we will capture these and work with them and find ways to make them actionable thoughts. Also, because of all the conversations, we will look at having a repeat of this, but for the youth and with the youth, right. and not with young people like me.
Right, so thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much, Abina. Thank you very much, Abina, as well. Thank you very much, Sheila. Thank you very much, Kwamina. And then thank you very much, Charlotte. My name is Kwesi Efree. Of course, I work with Metro TV. I was your MC or host for the day. Have a very good afternoon.
you